Hey guys, imagine waking up every morning knowing you'll spend the rest of your day locked away in a dark, windowless room. Welcome to womanhood in ancient Greece. Picture this. You step outside for a second, and someone hands you a ledger of rules thicker than the Iliad. Intrigued? Stick around, because if you thought modern life was complicated, wait until you hear about garments you can't wear, people you can't meet, and laws you can't break, unless you want to get beaten, fined, or worse. Before you get comfortable, please hit like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do. Drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's dive together into today's journey. Let's start with the biggest pleasure and terror of any woman's life back then: marriage. But first, let me ask you this. Have you ever had to negotiate your entire future at age 12? In many Greek city-states, brides were betrothed before they even understood what betrothal meant. They generally woke up, ate breakfast, and bam! Suddenly they had to wear a veil, move into a strange house, and obey a stranger twice their age. Romantic, right? No? Well, imagine you're 14, you've barely figured out how to use a spinning wheel, and now you're expected to entertain dinner guests, produce heirs, and not complain when your husband brings home a few concubines for extra company. Speaking of company, women of respectable families rarely left the andron, the women's quarters, except to attend funerals or religious festivals. If you stepped outside without proper chaperones, neighbors would wag fingers so hard they might dislocate. Every outing required a network of family members to flit you from place to place, like some fragile porcelain vase. And if you dared to chat with strangers, male strangers, you risked a public beating. Yes, public, because nothing says trust like a flogging at the marketplace for having the wrong facial expression. Now picture your daily schedule. Sunrise, household chores. You'll grind grain with those Stone Age contraptions until your arms resemble overcooked spaghetti, just in time to bake bread in an oven that's hotter than any modern sauna. By noon, laundry time. Dip tunics into cold water, stomp out the stains, hang them on rocks to dry. By afternoon, it's weaving time. Warp and weft until your eyes cross, because if there's one thing ancient Greeks hated, it's a woman who can't produce textiles. Dinner prep consumes the rest of your daylight hours. Then, after what felt like a full triathlon of domestic labor, you finally collapse, only to be summoned for evening prayers or forced to entertain female relatives discussing dowries and the latest sin your teenage daughter allegedly committed. And don't get me started on medical care. If you experienced menstrual cramps, there was no Tylenol or heating pad. Instead, your mother might hand you a poultice of ground herbs, some helpful, many poisonous. If you bled too much, your options were praying to Artemis or hoping you didn't faint and bleed out on the cold stone floor. Childbirth was the superstar finale of a woman's life. About a 50-50 chance you'd survive. No epidurals, no antiseptics, and midwives who smelled like last week's fish. The ritual involved chanting, pressing on your belly, and occasionally slapping you awake if you fainted. If things went south, the family might sacrifice a goat and hope the gods turned in your favor, because nothing screams quality health care like sacrificial livestock. Let's rewind a bit. You probably thought this was all about marriage and babies, but social status also determined how much freedom you had. Spartan women actually enjoyed more rights than their counterparts in Athens. They could own land, train in javelin, and wear more practical clothing. But don't get too excited, their men were off fighting wars, so the women were basically running the economy in full armor. Meanwhile, in Athens, the cultural mecca, birthplace of democracy, you were legally invisible. You couldn't vote, couldn't own property independently, couldn't give testimony in court unless a male guardian vouched for you. If someone stole your sandals, good luck convincing a judge unless your husband or father showed up to argue on your behalf. So basically, you were legally about as useful as a decorative urn. But ideology is half the battle. The Greeks believed women were emotional ticking time bombs. Plato's Republic relegated them to the same class as children, unruly, weak, irrational, because apparently staring at the Parthenon all day without complaining leaves you plenty of time to stew in your feelings. Philosophers often wax poetic about womanly flaws, susceptibility to tears, a supposed love of luxury, even though they were literally weaving their own clothes, and a penchant for gossip. Meanwhile, men were hailed as paragons of virtue, logic, and reason, because solving military strategy totally requires a Y chromosome. Now let's talk fashion, or the lack thereof. Your wardrobe consisted of two main garments, the chiton and the himation. Sounds elegant? Think of an overgrown curtain tied together with rope. That's your evening gown. If you were poor, you wore coarser cloth and maybe a veil, which was basically a sack for your head. If you were rich, you might have dyed cloth at exorbitant prices, so you still looked like a brightly colored sack. And laundry? A middle-aged woman would scrub those chiton folds until her knuckles bled because nobody wanted to wear yesterday's olive oil and sweat stains to the symposium. Speaking of symposiums, here's a fun twist. Apparently, it was okay for men to get together, drink wine, debate philosophy, and hire female entertainers, hetaerai, to sing, dance, and flirt with the assembled guests. But respectable women were never allowed. So while your brother was getting tipsy and pontificating about the nature of the cosmos, you sat at home, counting sesame seeds for the next day's porridge. Talk about FOMO. Religion offered a sliver of communal life. Women could serve as priestesses for goddesses like Athena, Demeter, and Artemis. These positions sometimes came with privileges, respect from the community, a small stipend, and the chance to boss around men who thought they knew best. But these roles were limited in number, of fiercely competitive, and often reserved for aristocrats with the right connections. The rest of you? You tag along on festivals like Thesmophoria, where women gathered in secret groves for fertility rites, eating beans, performing chants, and basically having a ladies-only retreat. No men allowed, which must have been a welcome relief, until you remembered you couldn't leave home without your male guardian's permission. Legal troubles? They loved those. Let's say a neighbor accuses you of adultery. Instant shame, potential divorce, loss of dowry, and exile. Even if you were innocent, the court didn't care. Your husband got to present evidence, often hearsay or your jealous sister-in-law's gossip, and you'd be out on the street, destitute. Meanwhile, he could buy another wife with the same dowry money. Charming. Of course, I haven't even touched on the joys of isolation. You spent most of your life indoors, no public debates, no philosophical salons, no big reveal moments and epic tragedies. Instead, you tended to olive trees, churned butter, and kept the home fires burning. Literally. If the hearth went out, you'd face serious social embarrassment. Even lighting a lamp required special oil, wicks, and a container that cost as much as a month's rations. No electricity meant most of your world was dim candlelight and dawn to dusk chores. But hey, at least you gotta learn the art of weaving, right? Spoilers. Weaving was a woman's duty and the expectation was perfection. One messed up pattern, one dropped thread, and your mother-in-law might publicly shame you at the loom. This wasn't a gentle critique. Greek shaming rituals involved loud scolding, sometimes with family members piling on criticisms like a viral tweet storm, but offline and with more ear-splitting shrieks. By now, you're probably thinking, is that all? Oh no, we haven't even started part 2. In the next 2,000 words, we'll explore the heartbreak of being a mother under constant threat of infant mortality, the absurdity of female education, hint, there was almost none, in the fleeting liberation found in hetaerai circles, if you could, stomach the social stigma. Ready to keep diving into this nightmare carnival? Stick around, because part 2 is where things get truly wild. And so, as you pull yourself up by your own, well, you're not allowed to pull yourself up anywhere, because you can't leave the women's quarter without a guardian. Anyway, let's talk about what happens once you've somehow navigated that bureaucratic obstacle course and actually become a mother. Sit back, or don't, because seating is a rare luxury. And marvel at the fact that, statistically speaking, motherhood in ancient Greece was about as safe as juggling flaming oil lamps while riding a chariot, blindfolded. First off, congratulations. You've reached late pregnancy, if you're lucky. Infant mortality hovered somewhere between maybe, and sorry dear, better luck next time, with some regions reporting as high as 30 to 40% of babies dying before their first birthday. And that's just the starter's platter. If you survived childbirth, roughly a coin flip event, you then embarked on the glorious postpartum period. No postpartum doulas, no breastfeeding consultants, no cushy bedrooms with lace-trimmed blankets. Instead, you had your lie-in, a literal period of rest of about 9 days, during which your husband's household expected you to lie quietly on your back in a dim room, while your mother-in-law, or a hired wet nurse took the baby and fed it. Lukewarm goat's milk. If the wet nurse was poorly paid or too poor to afford decent goats, your infant might ingest more contaminants than nutrients. Soil, goat parasites, and a generous helping of whatever else was floating in that bucket. And what did you do during your lie-in? You lay there, fantasized about solid food, and probably felt guilty if you sneezed. A single misstep, say standing up to fetch water for your own parched throat, could earn you a scolding. You mustn't strain yourself. Meanwhile, the baby wailed, the wet nurse dozed off, and your husband discussed estate matters in the next room, oblivious to the chaos under his roof. If by some divine miracle both you and Junior survived infancy, your next task was education, or, more accurately, apprentice-level indoctrination into the art of running a household. Formal schooling for girls? Non-existent, unless you were aristocracy in Sparta, which, let's be honest, still didn't teach you Latin poetry or naval engineering. Just how to wield a spear, run alongside men in the gymnasium, and manage hell-out labor. The rest of you learned your ABCs from your mother. A for avoid public life, B for bake bread, C for childbearing, D for don't offend a male by showing intelligence. Lessons were typically delivered via proverb or curt admonition. A woman's tongue is her undoing, or better to be silent and be thought a fool. These pearls of wisdom were useful life hacks for fitting into a society that prioritized your silence over your savvy. Of course, the occasional exception glimmers like a rare gemstone in the historical record. Aspasia of Miletus, the famed companion of Pericles, was rumored to host salons where prominent thinkers debated politics. But note, she was an exception with an exception's price tag, an outsider, a freedwoman, a medic, resident alien, with intriguing looks and an even more intriguing intellect. She could speak, teach rhetoric, and write letters, because she was never officially one of you. For respectable citizen women, intellectual pursuits were a death knell for reputation. Learn too much, and you might be accused of witchcraft or, worse, of impiety for questioning the gods who apparently decreed your inferiority. Meanwhile, philosophical schools like Plato's Academy debated the nature of reality, ethics, and the best government, all without a single female student. In fact, some philosophers argued that women were inferior, mere misbegotten versions of men. Aristotle declared that the male is by nature superior, and the female inferior. The one rules, the other is ruled. If Aristotle could swipe right on Tinder, his bio would read, "Looking for intelligent conversation? Sorry, not interested in ladies." But let's pause for a moment to appreciate the brief, bittersweet respite found among the hetairae, the courtesans of the symposium. These women, often educated and charming, could mingle with men at drinking parties. They sang, danced, flirted, and yes, enjoyed a modicum of autonomy, property rights, choice of partners, and the luxury of intellectual companionship. In some cases, they amassed wealth and influence. Yet this came with a caveat. The moment a hetaira crossed an invisible line, refusing too many clients, demanding too much pay, or growing too popular, she'd face ostracism, violence, or ruin. Their status was as precarious as a candle flame in a drafty room, brilliant but easily snuffed out. As your child grew into childhood, those precious years before society began to clip your wings, your world expanded only slightly. Girls might learn spinning, weaving, household management, and religious rituals. They might accompany you to the Panathenaic festival, cheering on chariot races, or help with family sacrifices at the altar of Demeter, where wheat was plentiful and divine favor even more so. But public spectacle? That was reserved for men. Festivals had separate entrances, separate seating, and separate channels for tepid water. Women watched from afar, like VIPs at the zoo. Yes, that's the chariot. Go faster, boyos. Meanwhile, their opinions were about as welcome as seagulls at a picnic. Then came puberty, a magical time when your primary purpose in life crystallized. Marriage, again. Except this time, you'd have to navigate dowries, matchmakers, and more paperwork than a modern mortgage. Your dowry, a sizable sum of land, livestock, or silver, sat in a guardian's vault, untouchable by you. If your husband died, the dowry returned to your male relatives, not to you. Remarriage required new negotiations, fresh contracts, and once again, the terrifying prospect of uprooting your life to join a stranger's household. If you were widowed without sons, you landed in the most precarious of positions, a childless widow. Your future looked bleaker than a Sparta winter. Your male kin, brothers, uncles, might argue over your dowry, your marriage prospects, or whether you should dedicate your life to chastity and limping around in sackcloth and ashes as a religious penance. You could become a social pariah, too old for marriage, too powerless to defend yourself. Some widows opted for sanctuary in temples, safe-ish havens under the gods' protection. Just don't annoy Athena or Artemis. Divine eviction could be as ruthless as any mortal one. And then we arrive at the grimly comedic finale, aging. In a society that valued women primarily for their youth, fertility, and domestic prowess, growing older was a social death. Men aged into dignity, wise grandfathers dispensing advice. Women aged into burdens, grumpy matriarchs rattling pots and scolding grandchildren for failing to memorize Homer. Elderly women without family owed nothing to society, and society owed them nothing in return. Some might beg, others might rely on charity from local temples. Those lacking even that fallback often met their end in relative obscurity, their names unrecorded, their lives footnotes in a history penned by men. Throughout all these stages, betrothal, wifehood, motherhood, widowhood, old age, the legal system loomed like a guillotine blade above your head. A husband could strike you, a father could sell you in cases of debt or extreme poverty. A brother could imprison you. Divorce left you homeless. Remarriage required fresh dowries. Laws regulating inheritance, property, custody, and custody battles ensured that women remained dependent on male guardians until their dying breath. By now, you might be wondering, was there anything good about being a woman in ancient Greece? Sure, if you were Spartan, you got to enjoy relative freedom, own land, and train physically. If you were a hetera, you gleaned autonomy and influence. If you were a priestess, you commanded respect and a small paycheck. But for 90% of women, citizen, free but unremarkable, their lives were a relentless slog of domestic labor, legal invisibility, and existential anxiety. Every day bore the same routine: rise before dawn, work until dusk, pray in the evening, sleep on a straw bed, wake up, and do it again. Forever. So, what did ancient Greek women truly experience? A cocktail of endurance, resignation, and subversive humor. They found solace in weaving intricate tapestries, literal and metaphorical, embedding stories, prayers, and coded messages into their textiles. They gathered in kitchens, whispering jokes about their husbands, bonding over burned bread and cold porridge. They developed mental escapism techniques, singing hymns quietly, memorizing epic poetry in secret, praying to goddesses who offered a sliver of hope. And they nurtured fierce loyalties among each other, mothers to daughters, sisters to sisters, neighbors to neighbors. Because when society treats you like chattel, your only weapon is solidarity, and the ability to laugh at your own absurd predicament. In that sense, ancient Greek women were more resilient, more resourceful, and more rebellious than history often acknowledges. Their everyday rebellions, omitting a dowry item, slipping out to visit a friend, quietly refusing a husband's request, were small sparks that cumulatively challenged the patriarchal order. Their weaving, their prayers, their whispered stories in the dark were acts of defiance. And though the historical spotlight rarely falls on these acts, they were the threads holding the broader tapestry of Greek society together. So, lovely viewers, as you reflect on your modern freedoms, the right to vote, the right to education, the right to wear trousers without scandal, remember that Greek women fought their own gladiatorial battles at home. Their prize? A moment of peace, a smile shared with a fellow sufferer, a breath of autonomy. Their arena? The loom, the hearth, the shadowy corners of a world that refused to let them stand in the sun. Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll delve into the wonderland of women's religious cults, the secret rituals, the clandestine gatherings, and the occasional deity who might have actually had your back. We'll also explore the rare cases of female philosophers and poetesses who dared to scribble their own narratives into history's margins. Until then, keep your weaving needles sharp and your spirits sharper, because the story of ancient Greek women is one hell of a tapestry, stitched with pain, irony, absurdity, and the unbreakable human will to survive. Alright, let's peel back the next layer of this ancient nightmare carnival. Welcome to part 3, where your only saving grace is religion. Spoiler, it's still a trap. Imagine you've survived betrothal, marriage, childbirth, widowhood, and the slow trickle toward decrepit spinsterhood. Now someone tells you, hey, at least you've got the gods. And by the gods, they mean deities who demand secret rites, blood offerings, strict purity laws, and the occasional temple-bound ostracism if you slip up. Let's explore how religion became both your refuge and your new jail cell. First stop, the women's mysteries. No, not a Netflix true crime doc. You actually got locked in a dank cave or temple and sworn to secrecy. In Eleusis, the Thesmophoria festival offered women a rare overnight gathering away from prying male eyes. For 3 days, you and your fellow citizenesses would reenact Demeter's grief, bury ritual piglets, feast on secret cakes, and chant chants whose lyrics you weren't allowed to share, under penalty of death. Yes, the penalty for revealing the mysteries was literal execution, because nothing says spiritual liberation like a vow you can't tweet about. These rites served multiple purposes. On one hand, they provided communal bonding, the comforting flames, the shared sacrifices, the whispered jokes about husbands who'd never understand why you were glowing. On the other hand, they reinforced your second-class status. Only women of citizen families in good standing could attend. If you were a medic, slave, or even a citizen married to a foreigner, tough luck. You got the dust at home and maybe a stern lecture from your mother-in-law about the dangers of impiety. Meanwhile, in more exotic corners of the Greek world, other cults offered women fleeting power. The cult of Artemis at Ephesus boasted a temple with the largest foundations in the ancient Mediterranean. Priestesses oversaw annual rituals involving purified sea salt, charcoal fires, and elaborate dances. For those few days, you wore special robes embroidered with lunar symbols, a crown of myrtle, and a face painted in chalk white lead. Don't worry about the toxicity, that was just part of the sacrifice. The job came with room, board, and a small stipend, basically a government-supported sabbatical from your domestic grind. But break one fast or spill one drop of the sacred wine, and you face ritual expulsion. Back to the loom you go. Next, let's talk about ostraka, not the voting pots used to exile politicians, but the ostraka used in trials of impiety. If you offended the gods, or more likely, if a jealous neighbor claimed you had, the city might convene a trial. Witnesses, usually chanting male citizens, would recite your crimes. Stepping on holy ground in the wrong sandals, humming a banned hymn, or wearing shoes dyed with wine spill stains, considered unclean. Conviction meant public humiliation, forced apologies before the entire assembly, fines paid in cattle or silver, or in severe cases, banishment for a term of years. You'd be exiled like a political villain, all because you mispronounced a prayer to Zeus. And speaking of temple finances, ever wonder who managed those vast stores of olive oil, wine jars, and sacrificial livestock? Surprise! Women did. Yes, those same women locked in hearth-bound invisibility also ran multi-million drachma enterprises behind temple doors. They haggled over olive oil prices, negotiated grain shipments from Thessaly, and balanced ledgers with more precision than any Athenian banker. Yet, no inscriptions honored their talent. Instead, priests took credit, male-dominated councils pocketed surplus offerings, and female administrators faded into footnotes. Unless a modern archaeologist dug up a ledger annotated in a woman's hand, then she'd finally earn a mention. Let's shift tectonic plates to the world of women philosophers and poetesses, those mythical creatures whispered about in Aristotle's wake. Here's the brutal truth. You could know your Homer by heart, recite sapphic stanzas in your sleep, and dissect Plato's dialogues with razor-sharp insight, and still be barred from the academy's threshold. Socrates' disciples loved a lively debate, as long as the debater had a beard and no uterus. If you tried lecturing on ethics, the ideal state, or the cosmos structure, male students would smirk, nod condescendingly, and file a complaint that you disrupted their fragile male egos. You'd be told, thank you, but you're offending the symmetry of the lecture hall, and shown the door. Yet there were exceptions, brilliant anomalies who slipped through the cracks. Diotima of Mantinea, mentioned by Plato, taught Socrates a thing or two about love's higher mysteries. Some sources claim she was a priestess, a hetera, or maybe just a legend invented to spice up a male philosopher's dialogue. Regardless, her words on Eros revolutionized Western thought, yet her existence remains one of history's great maybe footnotes. Another name, Hipparchia of Maronea, a schoolgirl who ran away from home to join the Cynics. She dressed like a man, argued like a man, and even married the philosopher Crates on equal terms. For brief shining moments, Hipparchia lectured in public, debated with Zeno's followers, and defied every convention. But her story ended in obscurity, recorded only by Diogenes Laertius centuries later. By then, her reputation was already buried under layers of patriarchal dust. On the poetic stage, Sappho of Lesbos looms large, revered as the 10th muse. Her lyric poems captured erotic longing, domestic rituals, and the ache of separation. For women, her verses were a sacred mirror. Come to me now, O my companions, for you know my heart's desires. But under Roman rule, her works were censored, burned, and deemed morally suspect. What remains today is a patchwork of fragments, half-ruined papyri, and tantalizing glimpses of female subjectivity. Imagine a library of Sappho's complete oeuvre intact. Library flames consume it instead, leaving you with disjointed lines about laments and love's torments. That's the legacy of a poetess who dared to write from the feminine heart. Now, if philosophy and poetry were mostly closed doors, what about the humbler realm of midwifery? You've already experienced childbirth once. Maybe you survived. Maybe you're still haunted by the memory of that stone-edged birthing stool. But as a midwife, you'd witness dozens of women in labor, some screaming, some whispering prayers, and some dying in that same cramped spot where you nearly met death. Midwives trained apprentices in techniques passed down for generations, applying pressure to the perineum, using hot compresses to coax the baby down, and giving concoctions of herbs, some restorative, some lethal. Yet local medical guilds controlled by male doctors limited midwives' scope. If a baby died during delivery, or if the mother hemorrhaged, the midwife could be accused of homicide. Trials could involve tossing her in the sea or arresting her family's property. So midwives operated in the perpetual shadow of suspicion, healers until someone croaked, then criminals. Meanwhile, wealthy households sometimes invited female pharmacides to treat menstrual disorders, uterine prolapse, or chronic pain. These women mixed potions, poppy, mandrake, crushed seashells into analgesic salves. They performed manual repositioning, using early versions of pessaries made from dried animal bladders. If the potion relieved cramps, the pharmacides earned praise. If it sterilized the patient, she risked charges of poisoning. The paradox: too much healing was dangerous, too little was negligent, and no professional certification protected you. Your medical license was your reputation, and gossip was the scalpel that could cut it to ribbons. Let's not forget the occasional female ruler who hammered against the gender iron cage from above. Queen Artemisia of Korea fought alongside Xerxes at Salamis, commanded ships, and advised Persian kings. Her naval tactics nearly destroyed Athens. But after the war, Greek historians, male obviously, depicted her as a savage and barbarian, highlighting her gender as proof of moral corruption. In their telling, Artemisia's prowess was a grotesque anomaly, a cautionary tale. See what happens when a woman leads armies? Disaster. Meanwhile, her male contemporaries got statues and hymns. By now, it's clear that ancient Greek women inhabited a world of contradictions. Locked doors with secret keys, harsh laws with fleeting exemptions, invisibility paired with indispensable labor. Their religious cults offered escape but demanded silence. Their intellectual ambitions met scorn yet birthed revolutionary ideas. Their healing hands saved lives but trembled under a death sentence if things went wrong. And for every Sappho, Diotima, or Hipparchia, there were thousands of anonymous women whose names dissolved into mortar. So as you navigate your own modern freedom, logging onto social media, joining political rallies, or just ordering takeout in sweatpants, remember that these women navigated a labyrinth without Ariadne's thread. They mastered domestic hells, religious mazes, and legal catacombs, all while chanting hymns to goddesses who sometimes seemed deaf. Their rebellions weren't epic battles, they were whispered subversions, slipping a bit more oil into the temple lamp, stitching a hidden motif into a tapestry, trading a sly glance with a neighbor in the agora. In part 4, we'll bring this story home, analyzing how ancient Greek women's strategies of survival echo into our world. We'll compare their secret networks to today's online communities, their borrowed autonomy and cults to modern workplace carve-outs, and their coded textiles to Instagram activism. Because although the loom has changed, the threads of resistance endure. Stay tuned, if you dare. By now, you've survived the loom, the hearth, the courtroom, and the temple. You're practically a veteran of every labyrinth Greece ever invented. But let's flip the script. What if I told you that the survival tactics of those long-silenced women echo in our modern world? Strap in for part 4, where we bridge 2.5 millennia of resistance, proving that if you can outwit a Spartan overseer or slip a hidden motif into your wedding shawl, you can navigate today's digital agora just fine. First up, secret networks. Ancient Greek women bonded in kitchens, at funerals, in the dim glow of oil lamps, sharing rumors and practical advice. They passed clandestine messages, "Beware that magistrate," or "Here's a remedy for swollen feet," stitched into tapestries or whispered under the veil. Sound familiar? Swap the mortar and pestle poultice for a Google Doc, and you have the Modern Woman Slack channel, a private chat where you share discount codes, vent about microaggressions at work, or coordinate political protests. Those ancient kitchen conspiracies were the first social networks, minus auto updates and GIF reactions, and with a slightly higher risk of being flogged. Next, let's compare cult membership to today's workplace carve-outs. In some temples, priestesses enjoyed stipends, property rights, and the authority to negotiate large-scale oil shipments. Sure, they faced ritual expulsion for missteps, but they also held real power. Fast forward to now. Think of those women in tech who create women's affinity groups or resource circles within massive corporate jungles. They negotiate budgets for conferences, bring in high-profile speakers, and command respect, until the C-suite decides to restructure and absorb their funding into generic employee engagement. In both cases, you build a microcosm of autonomy, only to have it threatened by higher-ups who think unity means one size fits all. Let's not forget coded textiles, those woven manifestos hidden in geometric patterns. A woman could embed a lament or a political jab in a tapestry, and only her sister weavers would understand the secret message. Today's equivalent? Hashtags. A single number, me too, or number ni una menos, weaves thousands of personal stories into a visible tapestry, imperceptible to those outside the movement until the trend goes viral. The artistry is similar. Pick your medium, wool or Twitter thread, conceal your message in plain sight, and rely on your community to decode and to amplify you. Then there's the art of silence. Ancient Greek proverbs drilled into every girl. Better to be silent and be thought a fool. Yet women subverted this injunction by memorizing entire epics, reciting them in private gatherings. In our era, silence can be a shield too. Selective muteness on social media shields you from trolls and data miners. You curate your online persona by sharing only slivers of your life, just as a Greek matron might reveal only approved parts of her inner world. Both are acts of measured disclosure. Reveal enough to participate, but hold back enough to protect your autonomy. Consider the paradox of visibility versus invisibility. Women administrators in temples managed massive estates, yet their names were erased from the inscription stones. Today, female software engineers architect critical algorithms, recommendation engines, search indexes, only to find their code credited to a team name or an OpenAI research collective. Their contributions are essential but ghostwritten, much like those temple ledgers. The struggle to reclaim authorship, to etch your name on the historical record, is as current as a GitHub pull request. Now, onto midwifery's uneasy legacy. Ancient midwives healed, delivered, and sometimes faced trial for the inevitable tragedies of childbirth. Today's reproductive health advocates operate in a similar moral minefield. They patch up postpartum hemorrhages in underfunded clinics, counsel new mothers via telemedicine, and still risk legal reprisals in jurisdictions with restrictive abortion laws. The midwife's world of clandestine apprenticeships and herbal concoctions has transformed into underground networks of doulas, crowdfunding campaigns for medical bills, and encrypted chat groups that share risk management protocols. The continuum from poultice to mifepristone underscores how women continue to bear, and to heal, the brunt of bodily autonomy battles. Meanwhile, the hetairae, those educated courtesans who danced at symposiums, mirror today's content creators and influencers. They cultivated charm, intellect, and a network of high-status patrons in salons lit by oil lamps. Fast forward to now. Instagram models, YouTubers, and TikTok personalities build followings, negotiate brand deals, and dispense lifestyle tips from well-lit studios. Both arenas require mastering performance, negotiation, and self-branding, yet carry the stigma of selling yourself. The Hetaira's precarious balance between respect and ruin finds its modern corollary: influencers risking algorithmic deplatforming or being cancelled for stepping over unspoken lines. Education, or the lack thereof, also threads the needle between eras. Greek girls learned domestic arts by apprenticeship. Grammar, rhetoric, and logic were off limits. Today, while girls outnumber boys in many universities, STEM fields still grapple with gender imbalances. Early discouragement, stereotypes that women lack spatial reasoning in bro culture and labs mirror Aristotle's decree of female inferiority. Yet modern pioneers, like Ada Lovelace or the women of ENIAC, broke into forbidden territories much as Hipparchia slipped into cynic debates. Their legacies remind us that no barrier is absolute. What was once taboo can become tomorrow's curriculum. Let's loop back to religion. The ancient cult of Demeter offered women a semi-autonomous space to speak, to mourn, and to demand divine favor for their crops and children. Today's spiritual movements, feminist theology, goddess circles, pagan covens, provide parallel sanctuaries. Women lead rituals, interpret sacred texts, and derive community power. These modern rituals often reclaim symbols once used to subjugate, like the moon cycles that mapped Greek purity laws, and reframe them as sources of personal strength. The outrage about menstruation that once led to ostracism now fuels menstrual movement startups selling eco-friendly products and hosting global conferences. And what about legal status? In classical Athens, a woman's testimony was worth nothing unless vouched for by a male guardian. Now, legal protections for women exist on paper in most countries, but enforcement lags. Domestic violence shelters, rape kit backlogs, and unequal pay echo the ancient court's dismissals of women's grievances. Yet, just as coalitions of sisters petition magistrates for relief, modern coalitions lobby parliaments, file class action suits, and mobilize mass protests. The momentum may seem incremental, but change often ripples slowly through entrenched systems, much like the subtle but persistent shifts in Greek law that, over centuries, elevated women's status. Weaving all these threads together reveals a tapestry of endurance. The strategies may have swapped wool for Wi-Fi, but the underlying resilience is the same. When society says, stay in your place, women learn to operate in the margins. When speech is restricted, they develop coded languages. When legal doors shut, they find loopholes. When public roles are denied, they create parallel institutions. So, what's the takeaway? If you've ever retreated to a private group chat to vent about sexism, embedded a feminist slogan in your sweatshirt design, or shared a recipe for herbal tea to soothe period cramps, you're part of a continuum that began in ancient courtyards. Your memes, podcasts, and grassroots petitions are the digital equivalents of secret festivals, whispered tapestries, and illicit symposium performances. And here's the kicker. Every time you laugh at a sexist joke on Twitter, every time you slide a gift card to a friend in financial need, every time you tag Solidarity Sundays, you're echoing the subversive humor and solidarity of Greek women who wove hidden motifs into textiles, chanted secret rites in temple groves, and cracked jokes about their husbands' obliviousness. The world may have changed, but the core playbook, forge alliances, share knowledge discreetly, claim small havens of autonomy, and laugh in the face of absurdity, remains frenetically relevant. So the next time you're tempted to complain that modern life is too complicated or that progress is too slow, remember, while you're streaming this on your phone, Greek women were streaming manna from heaven, figuratively, by improvising poultices, coordinating spouses' schedules, and filing secret ostraca against impious neighbors. They laid the groundwork for countless revolutions of thought, and their threads persist in every hashtag we plant today. As we log off this journey, let's honor those anonymous heroines. When you draft a tweet, write a blog post, or drop a comment in solidarity, you're weaving the latest panel in humanity's vast tapestry of resistance. May your patterns be bold, your alliances steadfast, and your humor perfectly sarcastic. Because if history has taught us anything, it's that women's laughter in the dark can light the way to dawn. Imagine trudging through muddy fields at dawn, wrapped in nothing but a damp cloak, clutching a spear heavier than your hopes, and then being yanked awake by a drill sergeant who thinks sleep is a capital crime. Think modern boot camp is rough? Welcome to Sparta, where surviving one sunrise was a feat worthy of epic poetry. Hold on to your helmets because today we're diving into why you wouldn't last a single day at a Spartan military camp. Before we get too cozy, smash that like button and subscribe, only if you genuinely love this kind of historical carnage. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and whether you'd actually volunteer for this mayhem. Now crank up the grit, maybe pour yourself a strong drink, and let's march straight into the hell of Spartan life. Part 1, Morning Madness and the Agog's first test. Waking up to war, your alarm clock, a blast of sharp whistles and the scream of an elder soldier. At the tender age of 7, you were ripped from your mother's arms and thrown into the Agog, the Spartan education and training system. Today's your first day, so congratulations. Your honorific title is Paidiskoi, youth, but don't get used to it. Your new mommy and daddy are the whole camp, and their favorite pastime is testing whether you can clamber out of your makeshift hovel without making a sound. Fail, and you'll feel the sting of a cane. Just a friendly reminder that silence is golden when predators lurk outside. Breakfast of champions. Sort of. Next, breakfast. In modern times, you might reach for cereal or avocado toast. Here, you're handed a lump of coarse barley porridge, melazomos, literally black broth, and a sliver of goat's flesh so thin it could pass for leather. Rumor has it it's flavored with human blood. Rumor also says it's nutritionally complete. Your stomach rumbles, your teeth ache from the grit, and you remember, defense against hunger pangs is part of character building. Chew, swallow, smile, or else. The naked truth, clothes are optional if you're tough enough. Spartan kids train naked to build resilience and shame them out of complaining. Today's lesson, wrestling. Your opponent, a fellow 7-year-old. The pitch, mud up to your knees, no soft grass to cushion your fall. Every tumble into that sludge cements the lesson. Real men and boys don't cry. They grunt, they fight, they get up covered in filth and keep going. And so do you, mostly because if you stop, the drill sergeant will tap you on the shoulder with a switch. Survival of the fittest, literally. By mid-morning, you've graduated to the infamous Cryptia simulation. Imagine being chased at dusk by older teen warriors with knives, forced to vanish into the wilderness around the camp. If they catch you, they'll beat you bloody. If you survive until dawn, you've earned, well, bragging rights and maybe an extra ration of black broth. If you get lost, congratulations, you'll starve out and become Spartan fertilizer. Nature is the ultimate teacher here, and it punishes the weak without mercy. Lunch, the ration riddle. Lunchtime looks generous, a hunk of goat meat and more black broth. But guess what? They have your portion because you lost a timing in wrestling. Tough luck. In Sparta, your ration is tied to performance. Beat your partner in a foot race? Here's an extra slice of goat. Trip on your own foot? Enjoy a lighter meal tonight. Hunger isn't just a feeling, it's a scoreboard. Weapons 101. The afternoon is weapons training. You learn to wield the doru, spear, and the xiphos, short sword. Sounds fun? Try hefting a 7-foot bronze-tipped spear in scorching sun, then thrusting it into a punching bag of sand. Your muscles burn, your shoulders ache, and sweat drips into your eyes. Blink wrong, and the sergeant slaps the ground, shouting, "Eyes forward, Spartan." You muster every ounce of willpower to stand straight, because slouching in Sparta is equivalent to treason. Shield discipline. Next up, shield drills. Spartan shields, the aspis, weigh up to 18 pounds. You're taught that dropping your shield in battle is worse than death. It's shame incarnate. In training, you march in phalanx formation, shield locked to neighbor's shield. One misstep and you break the line. Sergeants swarm you, pricking your back with spears until you learn to keep formation. By the end, your shoulders scream louder than any battle cry. Afternoon? Nap? Dream on. If you dare close your eyes for a blink after 3 in the afternoon, you'll catch a switch to the back. Spartans don't nap. Rest is weakness, and weakness is a liability on the battlefield. So instead, you're marched to the mess hall, called the mess, ironically the only place where camaraderie blossoms over shared hunger, and forced to recite Spartan codes, loyalty to Sparta, mastery of arms, subjugation of self. Fail a line? They'll have you repeat it until midnight. Evening chores and moral instruction. When daylight dies, chores begin. You scrub communal cookware, patch tattered cloaks, and prepare training grounds for tomorrow. But even chores have lessons: teamwork, humility, and the understanding that no task is beneath a Spartan. While washing cauldrons, the sergeant lectures, "Your mess hall is your mother, your drill your father. Show them honor. If you drop soap in the mud, pick it up with your teeth." And yes, that really happens. Nighttime vigilance. Finally, lights out, or more precisely, torch dimmed, but rest is minimal. Every Spartan trainee must stand guard, rotating every hour. You huddle with your comrades, eyes darting across the dark perimeter. One false move, and you're sent back to the wrestling pit tomorrow at dawn. Sleep arrives in stolen moments, nightmares fueled by the fear of waking to another round of torture disguised as training. By sundown on your first day, you'll have learned more about the pain, endurance, and shame than most modern soldiers experience in months. If you're still standing, barely, you might think, okay, maybe I could do this. But remember, this was just day one. Tomorrow brings fasting, weapon races, and live fire exercises in the hills. And if you think life at the Agog softens once you hit adulthood, well, stick around for part 2, where we'll cover the brutal rites of passage at age 20, the merciless battles against neighboring Helot uprisings, and why even Spartan warriors prayed for a quick death rather than a drawn-out life of never-ending drills. So, if your heart's still pumping and your spirit unbroken, congratulations, you've survived the morning madness. But if your muscles are screaming and you're rethinking your life choices, just wait until the real fun begins. In part 2, the heat gets turned up to volcanic. The stakes become your very soul, and you'll see why Sparta bred soldiers so fierce that all of Greece trembled at the mention of their name. Until then, tighten your cloak, sharpen your spear, and keep that Spartan resolve ignited. And so dawn breaks on day 2 of your Spartan boot camp, if you're foolish enough to call it that. Today's curriculum kicks off at first light with the paideia, the moral and civic education that separates boys from, well, dust. No sooner have you rubbed the sleep from your eyes than a grizzled instructor shoves a sharpened reed into your hand and demands you recite the laws of Sparta, backwards while balancing on one foot. Get a syllable wrong or wobble, and you earn a glancing blow from his cudgel. It's the pedagogical equivalent of learning to swim by being tossed offshore. Terrifying, wet, and guaranteed to give you a cramp. By mid-morning, you're herded toward the assembly grounds for the legendary Dialos foot race. Double stadium length over uneven ground, with your tunic tied so high it falls off at the starting whistle. That's right, naked sprinting, because modesty is for weaklings. You barrel down the track, lungs ablaze and thighs screaming, while older teens jeer and hurl insults meant to shame you into buckling. Trip on a rock, and not only do you face the shame of rolling in the dirt, you also concede your nearest ration of prized whey cheese for the week. In Sparta, athletic success isn't just bragging rights, it's your ticket to a half slice of luxury food. Next up, communal dining, syssitia. You shuffle into the hall with your comrades, palms empty if yesterday's performance was subpar. Pay attention, if you're late, they lock the doors and you starve. If you spill your wine or break a ladle, you're stripped of membership and exiled from the mess for a month, guaranteed to incite more hunger-fueled desperation than any battlefield. As the iron-tongued server ladles out gruel, you recite the mess oath. I serve Sparta with body and soul. I eat with honor. I stand with valor. Get the line wrong, and they repeat it until dawn. Citizenship in Sparta was earned by a handshake and a shared meal, provided you survived the training to join. The afternoon brings weapons masterclass. Now you wield the Xiphos and Doru in live drills against Helot conscripts. Yes, Sparta's enslaved population is your unwilling sparring partner, and failure here carries a heavier cost than in the kiddie wrestling pit. A missed thrust could leave your Helot opponent dead, or you. Mistaking elbow for rib in these drills invites a court-martial for incompetence. Even a minor cut to your thigh leads to ritual flogging. 20 lashes with a knotted whip, each strike a reminder that precision means survival. But what about rest? Between drills, you're marched to the gymnopedia, where you learn to endure blisters by having your feet scrubbed raw with volcanic pumice, part hygiene, part punishment. Once your soles are shredded to a bloody pulp, you sprint barefoot across bluestone slabs, forging toughness in every step. If you falter, you're hauled before the paidonomos, youth inspector, who presides over a tribunal that includes a chorus of scowling elders. Their verdict? More pumice scrubbing, followed by an extra 3 rounds of spear throwing. When twilight arrives, bliss is short-lived. You're summoned to the Okryptia Night Watch, an honor reserved for the most promising trainees. It means you get to stalk helots under cloak of darkness, testing your stealth and brutality. If you capture one, you deliver him to a magistrate who decides if he gets a beating or a burial near the city walls. It's Spartan capital punishment practice disguised as elite training. By the time you return, if you're lucky, you're bleeding from a dozen scratches, your uniform in tatters, and your stomach howling louder than the wolves. Day 3 dawns before you hit the sack, and you're already 2 days into this regimen. Now they introduce the door juggling exercise. Volley a trio of spears in the air, snatch them before they land, then hurl them at a moving target, a tethered bull's carcass tied to a rotating post. This craft builds coordination, hand-eye reflexes, and a casual contempt for animal carcasses. Miss, and the spear snaps your fingers. Catch too timidly, and it skitters off into the crowd, endangering innocent bystanders. Each misstep is cataloged in your trainee dossier, because Sparta believes data makes discipline measurable. By midday, hunger has transformed you into a fanatic. The day's only relief comes when they serve the infamous mela zomos, the black broth that tastes like ocean sludge spiced with soot. You gulp 2 ladles, grateful for the flavorless calories, then race off to wrestling pits to reclaim scraps of goat meat from day 1's ration decree. The rule is simple: conquer 3 opponents in succession without pause, and you earn an extra slice. Lose, and you subsist on broth for the next 24 hours. It's a gladiatorial buffet ticket, Spartan style. In the late afternoon heat, you undertake the siege engine workshop. You're taught to crank massive torsion catapults, oxy-bowl, and lift weights equal to your body mass, an exercise meant to simulate carrying a wounded comrade across the battlefield. Your arms numb, you wish the catapult would launch you into the sea. But perseverance is the Spartan ethos. Break your neighbor's grip, keep turning the winch, and let iron and sinew meld into one unbreakable unit. As evening shadows stretch, you assemble for the final rite of the day, communal lament. Gathered in a torchlit courtyard, you stand naked in a circle, chanting the epitaph, "We are slaves, yet we are free." It's a paradoxical anthem celebrating your bondage to the state and the illusion of autonomy it grants. If a voice quivers, the sergeant in charge splashes cold water from a bronze ewer to shame you back into uniform resonance. It's a psychological crucible of Spartan identity, forge emotion into steel obedience. Finally, you collapse in the barracks on wooden bunks spaced mere inches apart. Sleep is an endurance test. Every snore, every fidget invites a trial by combat at dawn. Your dreams flicker with visions of spear point flames and the hollow sound of phalanx shields. You realize that the Spartan camp isn't just a school, it's a forge that hammers you into a weapon. By the end of part 2, you've mastered black broth tolerance, spear juggling, sleepless endurance, and the art of inflicting silent terror. Your body aches in ways you didn't know possible, but your mind pulses with the Spartan code, Mal on Lab, come and take them. Yet even as you chant that defiance, a small voice whispers, can I really live like this for decades? Stick around for part 3, where we'll chronicle your official induction at age 20, the blood oath sworn in the heat of war, and the ghastly realities of Helot uprisings. We'll see why even hardened Spartan warriors, Polybius and Pausanias included, hoped for a swift death rather than an eternity of agage drills. Until then, steel your resolve and prepare your body. Sparta's crucible only grows hotter. Part 3, from boyish bruises to battle-ready blades. By now, you've endured the roadside wrestling pits, the black broth fasts, and more pumice foot scrubbing than any sane person would endure in a lifetime. But Spartan training is nothing if not escalating. Day 3's harrowing exercises were a prelude to the adolescent rites that transform you from a 9-year-old grunt into a 20-year-old hoplite, one of the elite citizen soldiers famed across Hellas. Buckle up, because in this part, you'll face the notorious rites of passage at puberty, the merciless helot suppression drills, and the baptism by fire of real warfare. First, the rite of the Kouragioma. Entering manhood. At around age 12, every Spartan boy undergoes the Kouragioma, the trial of courage. There's no gentle pat on the back or commemorative feast. Instead, you're led blindfolded into the wilderness with only a dagger and a tunic, then told to find your way home without making a sound or being captured. The forest floor is your enemy. Snakes coil in the underbrush. Porcupines lurk behind fallen logs, and wolves prowl just beyond earshot. At night, you must pierce a helot sentinel's cloak, steal his shoes, and return them undetected. The penalty for failure is brutal. If caught, the helot may beat you, not as punishment, but as corrective guidance meant to harden you. If you survive unseen, however, you earn a scarlet cloak, embroidered with a single white stripe, a symbol that you've tasted fear and refused to scream. That cloak doesn't just keep you warm, it brands you as one step closer to full Spartan citizenship. Dusra, the endurance ordeal, fasting and forced foraging. Following the courage trial, you enter the endurance ordeal, a week of near starvation interrupted only by clandestine foraging missions. Food during this period is strictly rationed. Tiny scraps of barley bread and goat hide boiled in brine. Being hungry in Sparta is not a momentary discomfort, it's a strategy. Your instructors believe that a soldier who hunts for food in a foreign land without complaining will not flinch when his enemy's spear is aimed at his chest. Every night for 7 nights, you and a small squad of peers are dispatched with only a dagger to hunt rabbits, pigeons, or fish in a nearby stream. Failure means returning to camp empty-handed and receiving lashes at dawn. Success means earning a handful of dried figs, considered a delicacy so rare it glimmers like gold in your memory. By the end of the ordeal, your stomach has shrunk so small that you can't even finish a single ladle of black broth without feeling nauseated, a feature, not a bug, according to Spartan doctrine. Moondram, the formation of the Krypteia squad. At age 16, the most promising youths are selected for the Krypteia, a secret police force designed to terrify the helot population into submission. It's not training anymore. It's sanctioned assassination practice. Under cover of darkness, you and your comrades patrol the outskirts of Lacedaemon, stealthily infiltrating villages and dispatching any helot deemed untrustworthy. Armed with a curved dagger and clad in dark cloaks, you slip through the night like ghosts. Silence is mandatory, mistakes are fatal. If you're too loud, a helot might escape and sound the alarm. If you hesitate, you lose your place in the squad, and with it, any hope of full citizenship. By the end of this trial, you've either witnessed blood spilled in the name of state security or you've failed, and been expelled from the agode, doomed to live as a permanent underclass. Non-Gavada. The duel, wrestling versus the hoplon. Back in the main camp, your afternoons revolve around hoplite wrestling. Not the friendly Olympic-style matches, but lethal combat training using real shields and spears. In a gear-limited arena, 2 youths don only a helmet and shield, and attempt to unbalance each other with spear thrusts and shield bashes. Each bout lasts until one fighter disarms or incapacitates the other. This is character-building Spartan style, which translates to learn to love pain. Every bruise, every slash is evidence that you're molding your body into an unbreakable phalanx component. The message is clear: in the slipperiest mud of Thermopylae, your shieldmate's life depends on your unflinching grip and your willingness to thrust your blade into any obstacle. Helot, Persian, or fellow Spartan. Eindavda, real combat drills, the Helot Rebellion. Simulation, the Helots aren't just targets for assassination, they're your constant practice fodder. Twice a month, the camp orchestrates a Helot Rebellion simulation. Hundreds of Helots chained at the ankles surge toward the training field, like a tide of desperate cattle. Your unit, clad in full armor, helmet, cuirass, greaves, hoplon, and doru, must hold the line. Imagine standing shoulder to shoulder, shields locked, as a wave of terrified but fierce slaves bear down on you. Their necklaces clink as they run, their eyes lit with dread and fury. You thrust your spear into the moving crowd, then yank it free, only to block a helot's flail with your shield rim. If the line breaks, you retreat under fire, shields raised, jamming your spear butt into the dirt to use as a brace against the enemy. At nightfall, the rebellion is quelled, and your sergeants inspect your armor for dents and bloodstains. Each dent is recorded in your service log. Too many dents and you're deemed careless. Aravada, the oath of the hoplite, swearing blood and bronze. At age 20, after years of ceaseless torment, you reach the apex of Spartan training. You are summoned to the Apella, the citizen assembly, to take the hoplite's oath. Clad in your finest panoply, you stand before the Jerusia, council of elders, and recite, "I swear by Helios who sees all, by Sparta our mother, and by Lycurgus our lawgiver, that I will keep the shield intact. Should I desert it, may it lie under." my blood-drenched corpse, for I serve not merely myself, but the Agog, the phalanx, and the city I love. The phrasing is melodramatic, but no less binding. The shield becomes an extension of your spine. Losing it in battle is worse than death. It's betrayal. Aram, baptism by battle, march to Tegea. Within weeks, you're marched with 300 fellow newly minted hoplites on a campaign to Tegea, a perennial Spartan foe in Arcadia. This is your first taste of real war, minus the Hollywood theatrics. No cinematographers or fanfare, just dust, blood, and the metallic tang of fear. You trudge for days, carrying 5 days' rations of dried figs, hard-cured pork, and barley cakes. At dawn on the 5th day, you reach the Tegean walls. As you approach, enemy archers begin a hailstorm of arrows. Your phalanx huddles tight, each man's shield overlaps his comrade's, creating a moving iron shell. You raise your door overhead in unison, the crowd's war cry a single, guttural roar that rattles your jaw. The clash is immediate. Tegean hoplites meet you spear to spear, shields screeching, boots slipping in goat's blood and trampled sardines. You thrust, you push, you grunt with every fiber of your being, and somehow you survive. 2 days later, Tegea sues for peace, thanks in no small part to your unbreakable line. Itavde, triumph and trauma, return to Lacedaemon. Back in Sparta, you're hailed as a hero. If the term hero can apply to someone who smelled death so intimately that they wake in sweat-drenched nightmares, your fellow citizens clap you on the back, children stare wide-eyed, and old men nod in approval. Yet inside, you're hollow. You've tasted blood, you've shouldered a shield above a fallen comrade's body, and you felt the disconnect between your youthful spirit and the machine you've become. At the banquet that follows, you're served extra goat meat and wine, precious. You raise your cup, recite a toast to Leonidas and the 300, and force a smile. You eat slowly, the taste of wine coating over your memories of spear thrusts and flayed helot flesh. The laughter of your comrades bounces around the hall, but your mind drifts back to the fields of Tegea, to the first man whose life you ended with your blade. Devyadi, the burden of the shield, citizenship's hidden cost. As a full citizen hoplite, you now have rights to vote in the appella, to own land worked by helots, and to marry. But every right carries the weight of responsibility. Your helot contingent on the family farm is bound to your service. If your group fails in the next campaign, your father's land will be confiscated. Every farm yields more grain than any modern estate, but that grain feeds your mess, yours and your comrades. You realize that freedom in Sparta is a paradox. You are free to speak and vote, but only if you comply with a lifetime of regimentation. The helots till your land so you can train. The appella courts your obedience so you remain loyal. Your shield binds you to this cycle until your death in battle or in barracks. But Davda, reflection, before the final forge. Part 3 ends with you standing before the Eurotas River at dawn, dripping with dew and clotted grime. Your armor glints in the rising sun, and you grip your hoplon so tightly your knuckles ache. You look east toward the land you've already conquered, and wonder, have I become a Spartan, or have I surrendered my soul to the Agog? Tomorrow you'll don black cloak and return to the camp to train recruits, boys of 7 fresh from their mother's arms. You'll oversee their courage tests, their fasting, and their wrestling. You'll remind them, as your drill masters reminded you, that endurance is honor and pain is glory. And you'll conceal, behind your grizzled exterior, the quiet dread that one day a fresh cohort of youths will march you to your own courage test. The battlefield. Stay tuned for Part 4, where we'll peer into the twilight of your career. The gray-haired veteran's rights, the soul-crushing loss of younger Spartans at Thermopylae, and the final epilogue that explains why Sparta's greatest legacy is both its triumph and its tragedy. Until then, rest those shoulders. Your hoplon will feel heavier tomorrow. Part 4. The Twilight of the Shield, Veteran's Burden and Sparta's Legacy. As you settle into your 30th year, a seasoned hoplite with a dozen campaigns under your shaved head, you might imagine the worst is behind you. Wrong. In Sparta, aging doesn't soften the blows, it sharpens the stakes. Welcome to the Veteran's Crucible, where your value hinges on one question. Can your battle-scarred body still carry a shield into hell's next furnace? Gray cloaks and heavy shields. At age 30, you graduate from the black cloak of the training phalanx to the gray cloak of the veterans. It's meant to signal your experience, but it also marks you as a relic. Your weakened knees ache under the same 18-pound hoplon you carried at 20. Drilling alongside fresh-faced recruits, you're expected to demonstrate spear techniques with the zeal of youth. A single flinch or misstep earns a sharp rebuke. "Old man," they jeer, "go fetch the pain balm for the living." Yet you endure, because stepping aside means forfeiting your land, your mess membership, and your place in history. The annual muster, still no vacation. Every spring you assemble at the Fidicia, the great muster at the Platanistas. Thousands of hoplites line the banks of the Eurotas. For outsiders, it's a spectacle. For you, it's another chance to prove you're not too old to hold the line. You shoulder your shield, raise your spear, and run the hoplitodromos, twice the stadium length in full armor. Each footstep clangs like a gong tolling your mortality. As you collapse across the finish line, gasping for breath, the young jump up to sprint again. But surrender is unthinkable. You grate the words Sparta above self through clenched teeth until you finish, mentoring the next generation. Between musters, you're conscripted as an Ephoros, training the Agilai, youth divisions, in spear drills and phalanx cohesion. Standing before 7-year-olds, you bark orders while your body protests. Each crisp command, shield up, toe forward, reverberates with echoes of your own childhood terrors. You push and punish until the boys freeze in formation. Then, you catch a glimpse of your reflection in their terrified eyes and realize you're both mentor and monster, forging trauma into tradition, marriage, family, and the helot economy. Your helot-run estate still churns wheat and barley to feed your mess. You have sons of your own, but their training begins at 7, just like you once did. You watch your 6-year-old practice the long jump in the courtyard, landing in a husk pit. A flare of pride lights your chest until you remember the spear drills he'll face tomorrow, the hunger tests, the naked wrestling in mud. Fatherhood in Sparta is a paradox. You love your sons, yet you must steel them for a world that sees tenderness as weakness. Thermopylae's shadow, when heroism becomes obligation. Every Spartan knows the legend of 480 BCE, 300 brave souls holding Thermopylae's pass. You weren't there. You were a boy of 9, digging roots, but the legend became doctrine. At every campfire feast, elders recite, "Come and take them." Leonidas' defiance that inspires awe and guilt. You carry that weight. If Persia returns, and they always threaten to, will you stand at the hot gates, shield locked with brothers ready for glory? Or will you falter and bring shame upon your lineage? The question haunts your dreams, stirring nightmares of spears raining down, and you, the gray-cloaked hoplite, dropping to one knee. Decline of the phalanx, when numbers matter more than skill. Over the decades, Sparta's population dwindled. Each plague, each helot revolt, each campaign to Messenia sapped recruits faster than the Agouge could train them. By your 40th year, you see fresh recruits with half your skill but double your weight. In strategy sessions, E4s debate lowering the Agog standards to fill ranks. You oppose them, arguing that untested youths in the phalanx are liabilities. But tradition bends under necessity. You realize that soon, the legendary Spartan line will be a tragic farce. Shields full of holes, spears handled by the timid, eyes lacking the Spartan glare. A battle you never chose, warfare's unforgiving march. In your 45th year, Sparta calls for volunteers to suppress a Messenian uprising. Your F4s promise glory and land grants. You volunteer out of duty in hubris. On campaign, you march for days, dusty and worn. At dawn on the 7th day, your column meets the enemy on broken ground littered with burned farms. You grip your spear, vision blurring with exhaustion. The clash is brief and brutal. Voices shout, shields crack, armor dents. When it's over, you stand in a field of bodies, helot rebels and hoplites alike, spattered with blood you've shed and blood you've soaked up. Your victory chant sounds hollow through a throat raspy with dust. Post-battle reckoning, the cost of survival. After the battle, you return to Sparta with 6 other survivors from your century-strong detachment. They call you heroes. Inside, you taste ash. You see your neighbors mourning sons you once trained. You realize your obedience turns fathers into widowers in a cycle that never ends. Over wine at the mess, the ephors toast your valor. You raise your cup, but the final sip tastes like betrayal. Of youth, of camaraderie, of the very spirit that once made Sparta unbeaten. The last muster in the eclipse of the Spartan way. At age 50, you're summoned for the final muster, an assembly you know you might not finish alive. Weak joints and failing lungs turn a simple drill into a death march. Younger men strap lighter shields. Your hoplon feels like a tombstone tied to your arm. You complete the formations, recite the old oaths, and march in silence past the ephors. When you collapse before the kurios, chief ephor, they help you stand. 2 months later, you receive the honorary burial accorded to veteran hoplites who die in training. Your body is embalmed, your shield hangs in the Syssidia as a testament. Sparta's legacy echoes in warnings. By the time you die, Sparta's glory has dimmed. Increasing variance in training, declining birth rates, Roman hegemony, and political strife have hollowed out the warrior state you bled for. Future poets eulogize your valor. Historians note Sparta's paradox, a society so devoted to military excellence that it consumed itself. Yet your blood-soaked saga endures as a cautionary tale. Discipline versus humanity. Sparta crafted unbreakable soldiers, but at the cost of empathy and long-term survival. Tradition versus adaptation. Rigidity in training once made Sparta invincible. Later, that same rigidity prevented necessary reforms. Individual versus collective. Spartan identity subsumed individual desires, forging unity but erasing personal legacy, until historians revived your story. So, why wouldn't you last a day, let alone a lifetime, at a Spartan military camp? Because Sparta demands the impossible. Endless endurance, unwavering conformity, and a willingness to sacrifice every fleeting joy for an imperial ideal upheld by iron and shame. The agauge hammers boys into soldiers, but it also grinds down humanity. Veterans like you emerge as paragons of duty, yet they relinquish their souls to the black broth, the cracked shields, and the unceasing march of history. As you log off your scroll, whether it's a papyrus or this digital screen, consider this. Modern challenges may not involve spears and phalanxes, but they still demand endurance, sacrifice, and solidarity. In corporate trenches, in activist circles, in daily struggles, we too face our own agauge. Draw inspiration from Spartan resilience, but remember their fatal flaw. When a society prizes conformity over innovation and ritual over empathy, it braces for decline. Endure, yes, but also evolve. Because survival isn't just lasting the day or the decade, it's thriving beyond the forge. Thank you for joining this 4-part journey through Sparta's crucible. If you've enjoyed trudging through mud, blood, and sardine-scented nightmares, hit like and subscribe. Your modern compromise is far less lethal. Drop a comment sharing which part made you want to toss your cloak into the fire, and let's keep this conversation alive, because history's harshest lessons deserve an audience. Imagine sand in every crease of your skin, frost in your beard at dawn, and the constant fear that a stray bandit arrow might end your journey before you've even seen jade or silk. Welcome to the Silk Road. Think road trips are rough? Try hauling 10 camels across deserts, mountains, and plague pits. Strap in, because today you're joining a caravan that makes every modern commute look like a stroll in the park. Part 1. Setting forth, dreams, desperation, and dromedaries. You wake before first light, head pounding like a temple drum. Last night's ration of fermented millet porridge gave you visions of singing onions, and not in a good way. Yet, here you are, kneeling in the chill, pulling on patched trousers stiff with grime and hobbling toward the line of camels groaning under bulky loads of Chinese silks, Persian glassware, and sacks of Kashgar walnuts. Recruitment and regret. 6 months ago, you were a blacksmith's apprentice in Samarkand, comfortably poor. Then you heard rumors of Ming silks fetching fortunes in Antioch. You sold your few possessions, mortgaged your soul to a merchant lord, and signed your name in blood, figuratively, to join this caravan. Today, regret tastes like the discarded onion skins you chewed for breakfast. Camels. The original all-terrain vehicles meet your new best friends. Bactrian camels, two-humped, slender-legged, and blessed with attitudes more volatile than desert winds. They can go weeks without water, but demand constant petty bribes of barley and insults. If you misplace the lead camel's halter, he'll drop to his knees and refuse to budge, folding himself like an origami disaster in the sand. Your caravan master, a sun-cracked veteran with one missing ear, simply smacks the beast's flank and mutters, "Stubborn as a tax collector," before yanking you into the fray to untangle the reins. the price of passage. Every merchant pays per camel, per mile, and per potential mishap. Thieves, scorpions, rival caravans. Your contract stipulates that if you live, you see half your promised share of profits. If you die, well, the camels keep walking. Death's a business expense, your sponsor told you. Now you can feel the weight of that expense in every blister. Navigating the oasis lottery. By midday, the sun beats down like a hammer. You trudge into your third oasis in 2 days, a glittering mirage of palm groves, motley traders, and suspiciously cheap water sellers. Each oasis is controlled by its own petty ruler. At Koiva, you paid a sack of walnuts for 3 cups of cool spring water. At Merv, you traded a length of ribbon to avoid a hospitality tax. Today, you face the greatest gauntlet yet: bid for shade under a date palm or risk sunstroke. You fork over 4 copper coins, collapse beneath a frond, and vow vengeance the next time your sponsor demands you pay another tribute. Language barriers and bizarre bartering. The Silk Road is a tower of Babel. Uyghur, Sogdian, Persian, Turkic, Chinese, even the occasional Greek from Byzantium. Your phrasebook consists of 10 survival words: water, stop, camels, thief, silk, sand, mercy, friend, halt, and help. You barter a length of imported indigo for a loaf of flatbread, only to discover it's dyed with chalk, great for photos, not sandwiches. You grumble in broken Persian while your neighbor, a Mamluk soldier, jabs you with his scimitar point. Next time, be polite. Desert hazards, more than just heat. At dusk, dust devils dance across the horizon, miniature tornadoes eager to fling sand into every orifice. You cinch your turban tighter, eyes stinging, and pray for the campfire's arrival. But first, a test of loyalty. Each merchant inspects camels, hides, and men for signs of plague. Someone in your group sneezes, instantly your suspect. The caravan guard draws a bow, hisses at the sick man to kneel, and barks, "Stay here until you're healthy, or dead." You tense, realizing that illness here is worse than bandits. Nightfall, campfire, camaraderie, and curses. Finally, dusk offers relief. The camels are unladen, gear is strewn in chaotic rings, and a halved goat simmers in a communal cauldron. Around the fire, Turkic storytellers spin yarns of lost cities buried beneath dunes. Chinese scholars debate the latest Taoist alchemy. A Greek physician feigns curing scorpion stings with vinegar. You nibble on spiced meat, if you're fortunate, and choke down a scoop of rancid whey. Conversation alternates between wonder, "Have you seen the blossom of feral apricot?" and spite, "May your caravan fall to bandits, you noodle-eating eunuch." The endless horizon. When the moon rises, you retire to your bedroll, eyes fixed on the same endless horizon you awoke to. Stars flicker overhead like silent witnesses to countless tragedies. Lost merchants, starving camels, travelers swallowed by quicksand. Sleep comes fitfully, dreams haunted by ghostly caravans marching across shifting dunes. You wake before the first camel grunt, pack your gear, and steel yourself for another sunrise of toil. The strange thrill of misery. And yet, as you shoulder your pack and mount your camel at dawn, a curious thing happens. You grin. Beneath the agony, there's a spark of awe, carrying spices that will flavor palaces, silks that will cloak kings, and ideas that will ignite empires. You're part of something vast, dangerous, and nonsensical. This insanity will be your story. What lies ahead? Today's march ends in Kashgar, a bustling Silk Road hub where merchants swim in rugs, jade, and Uyghur melons so sweet they make your teeth ache. But between you and that promise lie steep mountain passes, salt flats brighter than the sun, and the constant threat of bandits, and worse, scarcity. By the time you reach Kashgar, you'll count your blessings in camel dung and hardened bread. But trust me, that city's markets will make you forget the sand up your nose, the plague tests, and the one-eyed guards. Except, of course, for the scars on your hands, your mind, and your soul. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll cross the Taklamakan Desert, navigate treacherous mountain passes, and discover why caravan leaders carry prayer beads and poison alike. Until then, guard your meager water, mend your frayed trousers, and remember, on the Silk Road, survival is the greatest fortune of all. Part 2, across the shifting sands, Taklamakan trials and mountain mayhem into the Sea of Death. By dawn, you leave the relative safety of Kashgar's mud brick walls, trading the bustle of bazaars for the ominous expanse of the Taklamakan Desert, aptly nicknamed the Sea of Death. As your caravan trundles eastward, camels plod over sand dunes taller than cathedral spires. The wind roars like a beast, whipping grains into every fold of clothing. You learn quickly that the desert doesn't merely kill you with heat, it suffocates you with monotony. Day after day, the horizon remains the same, undulating waves of ochre. You hollowly recite an improvised mantra, "Sand is my pillow, sand is my tomb," and pray you don't end up buried alive beneath a dune slide. Mirages and misguidance. Around midday on the second day, a shimmering lake appears on the horizon. Your heart soars. Water. Yet as you scramble down a dune, the lake flickers and vanishes. The caravan master merely smirks. A mirage. You feel your optimism evaporate faster than your sweat. When real water finally materializes, a small oasis of thorny shrubs and a trickle of brackish spring, you pay a premium the size of a camel. You gulp thirst-tainted drops, each one a reminder that in the desert, hope is as treacherous as quicksand, camel carnivals and rebellions. Mid-road, you encounter another caravan, 200 camels from Dunhuang bound west with Buddhist texts and lacquerware. Their leader, a portly monk in saffron robes, attempts to negotiate passage through your camp for a share of your guards. Your master, a lean cut-pursued fellow with sun-baked ribs, laughs and demands tribute of 5 silk bolts. The monk protests that monks are supposed to be beggars of compassion, not merchants. The master retorts, in these parts, compassion is worth less than spoiled barley. A skirmish of words ensues, culminating in the monk conceding 2 silk bolts. You watch as the monk's entourage trudges off, their saffron robes stained by retreating defeat. In the Silk Road economy, even holy men learn that conviction doesn't pay the guards' wages. Sandstorms, the great equalizer. On the third night, the winds shift. What begins as a gentle breeze mutates into a roaring gale. Tarps rip free, tents collapse, and camels bellow in panic. You scramble to tether your bedroll to a camel's hump, only to be hurled face first into the sand. Breathing becomes an Olympic sport. Every inhalation burns your lungs as if you're smoking a live coal. Your eyes close reflexively, and when you open them again, you're buried to the waist in drifting drifts. Fellow travelers call out urgently. You shout back, "I'm alive, aren't I?" Which is apparently the wrong answer, because an unhinged guard nearly strikes you with a wooden staff. By dawn, the storm abates. You emerge, blinking, coated in gritty paste, and realize you've lost half your water, your map, and 1 glove. Welcome to nature's purge. Cemetery of caravans. A day past the storm, the caravan comes upon a haunting sight. Skeletal remains of abandoned camel trains, bleached white under the relentless sun. Tattered banners flap on broken poles, the only witnesses left of forgotten merchants. A Sogdian ledger book lies cracked open on the sand. You flip a few brittle pages and glean names of men who dared to race the dunes and paid the ultimate price. Some camels remain tethered, their bodies petrified in mid-step. Your heart constricts as you realize that 1 misstep in navigation, 1 spoiled cashie of barley, or 1 night without shelter could leave you sharing their fate. Caravans here aren't company caravans. They're mobile cemeteries. Lop Nur's vanished lake. After a week of trudging, you reach Lop Nur, once a thriving freshwater lake, but now a salt-crusted basin more barren than the surrounding sands. Ancient maps mark it as an oasis, but modern reality reveals only rusted wagon wheels and the skeletons of fish. A handful of local guides warns you there is nothing here but dust and ghosts. You set up camp on cracked lakebed soil. At night, the petrified mud cracks beneath your boots, each fissure releasing bitter alkali odors that sting your nostrils. The skies here are so empty you can see the whole Milky Way, but that beauty offers no comfort when your belly growls louder than the cosmos. High-altitude heartbreak, the Karakoram Pass looms, leaving Lop Nur. You head north toward the Karakoram Range, where peaks pierce the heavens at over 17,000 feet. The approach involves crossing the Kumtag Desert's rocky plateau, where camels balk at slippery stones and you risk a twisted ankle every step. Once at the base of the pass, you exchange your camels for yaks, sure-footed, patient beasts of burden, but foul-tempered and prone to spitting. You clamber onto a yak's broad back, only to discover that the saddle ropes chafe your thighs so badly you consider sliding off into the abyss below. High altitude saps your strength, your chest heaves, your vision spots, and every step turns your legs into wobbly stilts. The frostbite fiasco. At 12,000 feet, temperatures plunge below freezing at night. You and your co-traveler, a Persian spice merchant with a handlebar mustache, share a single yak blanket. You huddle together for warmth, shoulder to shoulder, but the biting wind finds every sliver of exposed skin. Your nose numbs, your fingertips go white and stiff. You mumble a half-hearted complaint. If I wanted to freeze to death, I'd have stayed home and endured winter in Samarkand. He snorts laughter that turns into a hacking cough. Weaker men wriggle inside their tunics like dying insects. Dawn reveals frost patterns on your beard, and you peel off icicles before they grind your skin raw. Glacial Creek crossing the icy gauntlet. As you ascend the pass's final slope, you cross a glacial melt creek. The water is crystal clear but cold enough to numb your bones in seconds. No bridge exists. You unstrap your heavy pack, wade knee-deep through the torrent, and hoist each crate of silk and porcelain across your head. At midstream, your boots slide on submerged ice. You slip and drop a box of Persian glassware with a crash. The glass fragments sink instantly, carrying hundreds of coins worth of goods to a watery grave. You bite back tears. After all, sorrow is a luxury here, and press onward, damp and victorious. Summit, euphoria and descent, despair. Reaching the Karakoram summit feels like touching the sky itself. You stand at the roof of the world, gazing down at valleys shrouded in mists. For a fleeting moment, pride swells in your chest. You've crossed the eighth wonder of the world. But the descent is a reckoning. Yaks balk at steep, gravel-strewn paths. Ropes snap. Crates slide down slopes, tumbling into chasms. You chase after runaway luggage, arms flailing, and catch one chest just before it vanishes. Inside, you find unbroken Chinese tea bricks, your sponsor's most prized cargo. You clutch them triumphantly, only to slip and mash your sandal against a rock. The pain reminds you, every triumph on the Silk Road is paid for by a bill of broken bones, lost cargo, or shredded dignity. By the end of this segment, you're battered, dehydrated, and staggering under a yoke of commerce and geography. Yet you press on toward Dunhuang, the fabled gateway to the west, where grottos sparkle with Buddhist frescoes and merchants swap stories over steaming bowls of lamb noodles. There, at last, you'll rest, albeit briefly, mending packs, paying bribes to local guards, and trading spoils for fresh supplies. Stay tuned for part 3, where we delve into the political intrigues of Sogdian merchants, the perils of the Gobi Desert, and the existential crisis of a traveler who has journeyed so far he no longer remembers who he once was. Until then, count your scars, brandish your spoils, and never forget, on the Silk Road, every step forward costs a piece of your humanity. Part 3, from Dunhuang to the Gobi, politics, perils, and personal crisis. You limped into Dunhuang on day 23, a ragged testament to the Silk Road's promise and peril. The oasis city's 50-foot walls loomed like a mirage, promises of safety cloaked in suspicion. You traded tattered clothes for fresh tunics, patched your boots with yak leather, and refilled your water skins, only to discover that Dunhuang's most dangerous commodity wasn't bandits or scorpions, but politics. Welcome to the Sogdian power play. Dunhuang's bazaars were dominated by Sogdian merchants, the Tyler Perry-sized middlemen of Eurasia. They controlled caravan taxes, local militias, even the postal relays. Their leader, Arsamu of Samarkand, greeted you with a perfunctory nod and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He offered you a loaf of spiced bread, then subtly hinted that your next waypoint, the Gansu corridor, required protection fees. You realized he expected tribute in the form of strings of jade beads, your most prized haul. Offering less would have your camels accidentally trampled by guard horses, offering more invited envy. You swallowed a sigh, handed over 10 beads, and watched Arsamu pocket them with the satisfaction of a cat who's just caught a canary. The murky world of alliances. That night, under a creaking wooden canopy in the governor's yamen, you tasted your first taste of Silk Road diplomacy. Persian envoys whispered with Chinese officials in a hybrid dialect of broken Mandarin and Farsi. A Turkic chieftain lounged at the back, fingers drumming on his saber. Each faction vied for control of trade routes, armies marched, alliances shattered, and travelers like you became unwitting pawns. When a heated debate turned into slaps and bloodshed, you backed away, clutching your silk bolts. Survival here meant more than outrunning bandits, it meant knowing when to be invisible. The final push, entering the Gobi Desert, refreshed and politically neutered, your caravan departed Dunhuang at dawn. The route curved north into the Gobi, an expanse so vast it makes the Taklamakan look like a sandbox. The trail wound through rocky badlands, salt flats that blistered your eyes, and skeletal forests of dead poplars. Water sources were mockeries, puddles the size of dinner platters poisoned with alkali boiling under the sun. Every camp required drilling new wells by hand, or paying exorbitant copper coins to local nomads who owned the water tables. When your own well collapsed into a subterranean cavern mid-dig, you paid a militia guard just to keep your dignity intact. Nomadic encounters, hospitality or hostility. Midway through the Gobi, a band of Mongolic herders materialized on the horizon, riding shaggy ponies. They surrounded your camp with curved swords drawn, either out of curiosity or malice. The caravan master offered a token gift, a length of silk, a handful of walnuts, and a prayer scroll. The leader of the herders, a grizzled man named Olgin, nodded gravely and gestured you to sit. Around a pit of glowing coals, he shared fermented mare's milk, an acquired taste that made your head swim. You returned the gesture with stale flatbread and watched Olgin's eyes narrow as he sampled your food. When he finally smiled, a crescent moon of yellowed teeth, you knew you'd earned safe passage. Sharing a cup of poison-tinted dairy had bought you a half a dozen miles of peace, the night of the 1,000 stars, and no shelter. One night, your guide led you deep into the Gobi's heart, promising a haven of reeds and freshwater springs. Instead, you found only a rocky plateau with no vegetation and temperatures plunging to near freezing. Your tents flapped uselessly, and your blankets offered little comfort. As you huddled around a sputtering lamp, you realized that gravity alone kept you from being swept off the edge of the plateau by sudden gusts. Some in your group cursed the guide, others wept softly. You stared at the sky, a cathedral of stars so bright they seared indelible patterns into your memory. In that bone-chilling darkness, you felt both infinitesimally small and inexplicably connected to every traveler who'd ever braved these same horizons. Bandits, bribes, and the price of silence. On day 28, you rounded a rocky bend and discovered your biggest fear, an ambush. Masked bandits armed with composite bows blocked the narrow pass. Their leader, a woman with fire-red hair and eyes cold as obsidian, demanded tolls and silver bullion. Your caravan master pleaded poverty. The bandit queen smirked and waved a dagger. You realized words were worthless. Only coin and silence mattered. Handing over half your available silver, you watched the bandits melt back into the dunes, rifles slung carelessly over shoulders. The bandit queen's parting shot, "Good luck selling silk when you have no money to barter." She was right. Your profit margins had just imploded. Midway Manifesto. The breaking point. The Gobi's midpoint was marked by a solitary stone tower, an abandoned way station from another age. Inside, you found weather-beaten records, lists of caravans that never emerged from the desert. Names of men, women, entire families vanished into shifting sands. A draft scrawled on the wall read, "He who leaves here with silk also carries the bones of the past." You realized your own mind teetered on that edge. Exhaustion, hunger, and betrayal had hollowed you out. Part of you wanted to turn back, to find a safer trade route, to live without the burden of molten jade in your pack and broken promises in your heart. The last oasis, a mirage of hope. Emerging from the desert's maw, you stumbled into Lop Nor's eastern fringes, an unexpected belt of tamarisk and halophyte shrubs. Travelers here spoke of a nearby spring said to cure ailments and refresh the soul. You found the spring, tepid, brackish, and infested with leeches. Yet to your cracked lips, it tasted like salvation. You and your companions bathed in it, offered prayers, and scrubbed away layers of grit. For a moment, you believed you could continue, that you'd endure every outrage this road could throw at you, because the lure of silver filaments woven in distant looms still beckoned. Identity crisis at the edge of empires. As you carted your remaining silks toward the eastern Han frontier, you paused at a boundary marker. a simple stone pillar inscribed in Chinese characters, declaring, "Here lies the Middle Kingdom." You looked, back at the trail behind you, an arc of dust, camel dung, and human suffering stretching to the rising sun. Who were you now? A merchant, a mule, a ghost trudging between worlds? The question gnawed at you more fiercely than hunger. You realized that the Silk Road's true cost wasn't the jade or the gold. It was the loss of self, the slow erosion of identity under the relentless sun and indifferent moon. Prelude to the final leg, your party assembled at the Chinese customs house, chests weighed, papers stamped, taxes levied. You watched your silk bolts dwindle, each meter sacrificed to tariffs and tributes. As guards herded you toward the final stage, you clenched your remaining wealth, debts owed, reputations tarnished, and an unshakable longing for the familiar smell of home. By the end of Part 3, you've navigated shifting alliances, survived the Gobi's bone-chilling nights, bribed bandits, and stared into the void of your own existence. Ahead lies the Eastern Han heartland, crowded markets of Chang'an, imperial courts hungry for exotic wares, and at last the promise of payout or betrayal. Stay tuned for Part 4, where we conclude this odyssey with the chaotic descent into Chang'an's teeming streets, the final reckoning of profits versus losses, and the haunting return home, forever changed by the 1,000-mile nightmare known as the Silk Road. Part 4, Into Chang'an, Triumph, Betrayal, and the return that never feels like home. By the time you clear the Eastern Han Customs Gate, the morning sun glints off Chang'an's 9 concentric walls like a beacon of victory and doom. After 38 days of hauling silks, spices, and shattered dreams, you stand on the cusp of the greatest marketplace on earth. Ahead lie streets thronged with eunuchs, scholars, artisans, and leering tax collectors. Behind you stretches the wasteland that nearly swallowed your soul. One last push remains. Sell your wares, collect your coin, settle your debts, and find yourself again in the wreckage of who you once were. First, the grand procession to the Western Market. Your caravan enters through the West Gate, an imposing arch crowned with dragon reliefs. Soldiers in gleaming lamellar armor scrutinize your passes. Porters and tax inspectors fan out, measuring every bolt of silk against imperial ledgers. You shuffle forward, laden with nervous anticipation. Your heart hammers like a festival drum. As you pass through the first ring, jeweler's quarter of 10,000 lamps, you glimpse shop windows glittering with jade bracelets, ivory hairpins, and polished agate seals. But you're not here for baubles. Your silks beckon in deeper districts. By the second ring, Silver Dish Road, you see wealthy patrons slipping into tea houses, their lithe concubines trailing behind on silken slippers. You adjust your nearly empty purse belt and pray the morning glow brings generous buyers. Dusra, the auction of foreign wonders. In the Western Market's heart, a raised dais hosts today's auction of exotic imports. Merchants from the steppe present fur pelts. Kushan traders display lapis lazuli. You unload your surviving silk bolts, a demi-pearl white brocade, a deep vermilion damask, and a length of pale chrysanthemum yellow patterned with sapphire threads. Each bolt weighs on your spirit like a soldier's banner, symbols of triumph and testimony to survival. The auctioneer, a gaunt official with brittle eyebrows, slashes his fan to command silence. His voice rattles across the square. First lot, Sogdian brocade, traded from distant Samarkand, are rumored to command 1,000 bronze coins per bolt. Who bids? Hands shoot up. Court ladies, wealthy merchants, a self-important eunuch clutching a ledger. Bidding war ensues. Bronze for silver, silver for gold. Your pulse races. Each raised paddle edges the price higher. Finally, after a merciless struggle, the last bolt sells for 1,500 coins, far above your reckoning. You exhale, feeling your stomach rise. Victory tastes like incense smoke and copper. Moondrum. The hidden taxman's kiss. No sooner have you counted your coins in a dingy side alley than an official appears. Robed in jade-green silk and smelling of sandalwood, he presents a crimson slip. Imperial levy, 10% on all foreign merchandise. Late fees accrue interest. Your triumph curdles. From 1,500 coins, 150 vanish in a puff of bureaucracy. You protest, beg, barter, offer a future alliance. But the taxman only smiles and folds the slip into your coat. Next time, he murmurs. Plan for the unseen hand. He departs, leaving you to cradle your diminished fortune like a wounded child. Nangavde, the streets of Chang'an, opportunity and overload. With half your haul sold, you wander the teeming streets, seeking buyers for your lesser silks and those precious jade beads you risked in the Gobi. Everywhere, marvels, paper lanterns floating above canal boats, oracular poets scribbling prophecies on willow bark scrolls, barber masseurs offering soot treatments that promise eternal youth. You weave through crowds of merchants selling camphor, Bactrian carpets, Roman glassware, and frankincense from distant India. At each stall, you hawk your wares, finest Kashgar walnuts, silk that would shame a phoenix's plume. Some hear you, most shrug. The marketplace is a cacophony of languages and haggling that makes your head spin. Eindavda, the velvet hand of the eunuch merchant. In his shaded courtyard off Silk Road Avenue, you encounter a eunuch merchant of considerable repute. Master Yu, whispered to be the emperor's favorite. Draped in vermilion velvet, he examines your silk scraps with a jeweler's scrutiny. His one good eye glitters as he pinches the fabric between yellowed nails. He offers a brisk evaluation. These are flawed. Loose weave, spot of dye misrun. I'll take them at 10 coins per bolt. Your heart flutters. You'd hoped for 20. You hesitate, but you remember the nights in the Gobi, the bribes to bandits, the frostbite, the smashed glass. Desperation outweighs pride. You nod. He adds a curt, pleasure doing business, and vanishes into a silk-whispered throng. In his wake, you clutch your slim purse, yet cherish each coin as a relic of survival. Aravda, the banker's ironclad grip. With coins jingling, you seek a quiet spot to settle debts to your sponsor in Samarkand. You find Master Chen, a banker with ledgers gaudy as palaces. His gallery smells of ink and wealth. He greets you with a bow and spreads pages of ledgers. Your contract states 1,200 coins advanced, 200 coins profit due to you after expenses. But Master Chen's red ink notes reveal subsistence ration charges, caravan guard gratuities, and banker's commission, all legal under obscure clauses you never noticed. By his calculation, you owe 50 coins to the sponsor, 150 coins to the banker, and 75 coins in processing fees. That leaves you exactly 25 coins richer than when you left home. You swallow bile, extract the remaining purse contents, and slide the coins across the table. Master Chen smiles thinly. Consider it capital for your next venture. You stagger away, the weight of imperial accounting pressing down like a monumental seal. Iram. Reflections in the mirror of the Grand Canal. Your mind bleeding from taxes and debts, you venture to the Grand Canal, where boats drift beneath arched bridges and willow branches brush in languid sadness. Here, foreign traders gossip about departure dates, rumors of bandits regrouping, and imperial edicts shifting like sands. You lean on the stone parapet, watching barges laden with rice and timber chug by. A poet named Guo Ling recites lines about travelers who never return with the dawn, and you feel each word pierce you. The water's surface reflects your weary face, sunken eyes circled by shadows deeper than night. You realize that despite the auction triumphs, every step east has cost a piece of yourself, innocence, naivete, and a sense of home. Irtavde, the pilgrimage home, choices and regrets. With only a sliver of profit and a heart hollow with disillusionment, you decide to return west. The sponsor deems you sufficiently experienced to captain a smaller caravan on the return journey, this time hauling Chinese tea, porcelain shards, and broken ideals. You gather 6 camels loaded with new cargo, parcels of tea so fragrant they could rally armies, porcelain bowls so fragile they shatter at the whisper of a sneeze, and a chest of scrolls mapping the path you've trod. Each item feels like a ransom paid to silence memory. You bid farewell to Changjian under lantern glow, stepping through the gates with a leaden heart. You look back at the city's domed towers, promising commerce, culture, and consumption. The city gifted you a fleeting fortune and took your soul in exchange. 9. The long road west and the ghosts you carry. Retracing the Silk Road in reverse is no easier than the outbound trip. Lessons from the desert return. Tariffs and bandit tolls still apply. Gobi nights still freeze you. Political machinations still lurk in every oasis. Yet now, each step westward carries anticipation of home's dusty streets. In Samarkand, the blacksmith's forge still glows. Your old comrades await your return. You imagine breathing familiar smells, molten metal, pine wood smoke, and fresh naan. You fantasize about a simple meal, no onions, no rancid whey, just bread, olives, and perhaps a chunk of cheese. But as you near the oasis of Merv, you feel the desert's final sting, the ghosts of those who never returned. You pass crumbling tombstones with names you once read in the cemetery of caravans. You glimpse a skull in the sand, perhaps a traitor who laughed too loudly, prayed too fervently, or simply gambled on fate one time too many. Each specter reminds you that survival is a precarious lottery. Any misstep seals your fate. 10. The homecoming that feels like exile. Finally, you crest the last dune before Samarkand's faded turquoise domes shimmer on the horizon. A wave of homesickness so powerful it renders you breathless washes over you. Yet when you step through the familiar gate, the blacksmith's apprentice you were has vanished. In your place stands a taciturn caravan leader, bent but unbroken, bearing copper scars and a heart armored against hope. Villagers stare at your sunburned face, decorated with hair the blacksmith mothered and trimmed a lifetime ago. Your family rushes forward, children clamor, neighbors cheer, but you barely hear them. Your mind drifts eastward, back to Changjan's cacophony, the Gobi's silence, and the desert's unforgiving lullaby. Home is a patchwork of memories and tangibles, coins you can finally spend, tea you can steep properly, silks you can drape in the smithy's shop. But the deeper you rebuild your life, reforging tools, ordering new tunics, the more you sense the fissure between who you were and who you've become. The Silk Road offered you profit, peril, and perpetual motion. Home offers you rest, routine, and the weight of everything you endured. Epilogue: The Silk Road's true legacy. So what did you gain from traveling the Silk Road? A handful of coins barely worth your scars, a shattered sense of self, and stories you'll repeat to thirsty ears. You carry jade-tinted memories of marketplaces and mountains, silk-soft regrets of choices made under duress, and a profound respect for the road's capricious cruelty. Yet within that crucible of commerce, you also forged resilience, the ability to bargain when diplomacy fails, to endure when resources dwindle, and to read human nature in the eyes of a bandit queen or eunuch merchant. You learned that value is not intrinsic but imposed by those with power, the auctioneer, the tacksman, the banker, yet that personal worth lies in survival itself. In the smithy's glow that evening, you carve a crude inscription on a metal ingot. To those who walk beyond horizons, the price is steep, but the journey eternal. You hang it above your forge, a reminder to every apprentice who dreams of distant lands that the Silk Road is a tapestry woven with ambition, avarice, and absurdity. A nightmare that, once survived, becomes a legend worth living. So next time you sigh about burner phone bills or office politics, remember the caravan that crossed deserts, mountains, and empires, and lived to tell the tale. Surviving the Silk Road doesn't grant you riches so much as an unbreakable testament. You dared the world's edge, bore its trials, and came home irrevocably changed. Whether that's triumph or tragedy is yours to decide. Imagine waking up on the shortest day of the year, stumbling through frozen peat bogs in nothing but your woolen tunic, lighting a bonfire to ward off ghosts, and then discovering half your village just roasted a neighbor's prized goat in a blood-soaked ritual feast. Welcome to Yule in Viking times, where survival meant wrestling frostbite by day and negotiating drunken oaths to Odin by night. Before the sun even peeks over the jagged fjord, your household is already ablaze with activity. Yule isn't Christmas. It's the midwinter nightmare of cold, hunger, and divine temper, tantrums wrapped in a glittering veneer of feasting. You light the Yule log, a massive resinous oak trunk dragged from forests, sacred to your ancestors, and you pray the spark holds. If it fails, expect a tirade from the hausfrau. Don't let the log die, you clumsy oaf, our souls are chilled enough. As dawn breaks, if it ever breaks, this far north daylight lasts only a few hours. You shuffle outside, teeth chattering, to prepare the blot, the communal sacrifice. Your neighbor Thorfinn's prized goat, thinned from the winter grind, is led to the altar. You hold the bleeding creature's head steady while the village chieftain raises his ritual sword. You flinch at the blade's glint, remembering that goat is half your food budget, but tradition demands it. The goat's blood spills into runic-etched bowls. Elders dip their fingers, mutter incomprehensible chants to Odin and Freyr, and sprinkle droplets on hearth corners. You wonder if the gods care more about your devotion or your dinner. With the blot complete, it's time for the feast. You roast goat ribs over open flames until the meat sizzles and drips fat. No fancy spices here, just salt, juniper berries, and the occasional smear of sheep's suet. You gnaw the bones in a frenzy, grease dribbling down your chin, while skalds, poets, recite long, winding verses about past heroes who died of arrow wounds, not frozen toes. You clap politely, though you'd rather be drilling holes in your tongue for warmth. Between mouthfuls of coarse rye bread and hunks of smoked fish, the ale flows. Mead barrels line the long table. Each drained horn is refilled with thick, honeyed brew that tastes like melted gold and regret. By the third horn, conversations devolve into boast. Who can stay barefoot on the frozen ground the longest? Who has slain the most wolves this season? Who can recite the entire tale of Ragnar's beard before passing out? You join in, crowing that you once fended off a frost giant, only to signal for someone to catch you when your legs buckle. As darkness falls again, only a brief reprieve before the next sunrise, you gather around the dying Yule log. Sparks drift skyward like fireflies, and you tell Galder magic tales, how trolls roam at Yule, seeking human kin to drag beneath the ice, how elves dance in moonlit groves, how the black raven of Odin circles overhead, marking who has pleased the gods. Children, their noses red as apples, tremble both from cold and excitement. You pat their heads, hoping they don't wander into the woods at night, chasing lights that are probably just swamp vapors. But who has the heart to rain on Yule's horror story parade? Finally, sleep arrives in stolen moments, huddled beside the dying embers. You dream of endless winter, of goats resurrecting and demanding justice, of chieftains turning to wolves under moonlight. When the log's last embers die, you press your ear to the hearth, listening for omens, and whisper to yourself, at least next year, maybe we keep the goat alive. But deep down, you know nothing says Yule like a little blood, a lot of ale, and the ever-loving threat of divine retribution. Stick around for part 2, where we'll dive into the aftermath of the blot, the fierce gift-giving challenges, the ritual hunts for boar beneath flickering torchlight, and why a single mispronounced runic verse could summon unkillable Draugr from their icy graves. Until then, bundle up. Yule's only halfway over. The goat's blood has barely dried on the altar when the real Yule madness begins. You wipe your hands on your fur cloak, still sticky with gore, and trudge back into the longhouse, where embers from the Yule log still glow like dying embers of a dragon's breath. Now comes the business of gift-giving, ritual hunts, and runic cakes that could kill you faster than frostbite. If you thought the blot was brutal, you haven't seen anything yet. The Great Gift Gauntlet. Every household must present a gift to every other household in the district, an exchange known as the guildie. The rule: gifts must be equal in value, or your honor is forfeit. Your neighbor Sigrid arrives with a beautifully carved horn goblet, etched with lupine motifs and polished until it gleams like a Valkyrie's eye. You, in turn, must offer something of equal worth, a length of dyed wool, a string of dried fish, or perhaps a handful of scented resin from the far-off pine forests. But what you really have is a single jar of honey, your last scrap of sweetness. You hand it over with a flourish and a joke. May this honey stick to your teeth as the gods stick to your souls. Sigrid smiles politely, but you see the flicker of contempt. Honey? How practical. You swallow your pride and vow that next Yule, you'll raid a scary for walrus ivory, runic cakes and poisoned words. After gift-giving comes the Rorokaka, runic cakes baked with hidden messages and cinnamon-stained runes. Each cake bears a single rune: Fehu for wealth, Uruz for strength, Thurisaz for protection, Ansuz for divine favor, or Hagalaz for hailstorms. You bite into your cake and read the rune scratched in glossy icing: Hagalaz, storm rune. May hailstones pelt your roof, you mutter. The baker, old Eric, cackles. Careful, friend. Hagalaz can crumble even the mightiest hall. The assembled crowd tuts and turns away, as if you just swallowed a curse. Lesson learned: never accept a cake without checking the rune first, and never trust a baker whose one good eye gleams with mischief. Ritual, boar hunt, the midnight pursuit. As night falls again, torches are lit and the clansmen gather at the forest's edge for the Jotun hunter, the giant boar hunt. Boar meat is prized for Yule feasts, but these boars are not your everyday swine. They're enormous tusked brutes rumored to be descendants of Gullinbursti, Freyr's golden bristled boar. You grip your spear, iron head glinting in torchlight, and slip into the tree line alongside hardened hunters who pace like wolves. The forest floor is slick with ice and rotting leaves. Every step risks a fall that could end your life or at least your hunting career. The hunt begins with a ceremonial howl to Freyr, god of fertility and boar breeder. Helmets off, voices raised in a chilling chorus that echoes through the pines. Suddenly, a thunderous grunt splits the night. A massive boar charges out of the darkness, bristles frosted with winter's breath, eyes glowing like embers. You brace yourself, adrenaline floods your veins. The first spear flies and misses, puncturing a tree trunk instead, eliciting boos from onlookers. The boar pivots, tusks lowered, and one hunter leaps aside only to land in a muddy pit. He emerges spattered in muck, yelping like a piglet. You lunge, jabbing at the bristly flank. The boar bellows and gore sprays. You wrench your spear free, heart pounding. Finally, with a coordinated push from your comrades, the beast collapses. You hack at its throat to finish the job, and red life spurts across the snow. The hunters cheer and carry the carcass back to the longhouse, triumphant and skeletally exhausted. Blood-soaked butchery and feast. Prep. Back at the hall, the boar's body is hoisted on a tripod over roaring embers. You help butcher the beast, slicing through sinew and bone with an ox-tooth knife stripped from a sacrificial victim last spring, sharp but stained with old, unholy history. Chunks of meat are marinated in brine and juniper. The head is set aside for later, when Jarl and priest will carve off bits of cheek meat as a further offering to the gods. You quarter the rest, hand the hams to the women for smoking, and reserve the loins for tonight's feast. Ale-soaked oaths and berserker stories. As the boar roasts, the ale barrels are tapped again, thundering horns of mead and barley wine. With each mug emptied, a new oath is sworn. Who will raid the next foreign coast? Who will build the finest longship? Who dares to face the Jotun in single combat? The craziest tale always wins a free round. This year, old Olaf claims he once wrestled a bear until it politely acknowledged his arm-wrestling prowess. You roll your eyes but grant him the horn. Some lies are best left unchallenged when you're drunk. Jogger warnings and ghostly parleys. Around midnight, the mood shifts. Torches dim, drum beats soften. The skalds begin chanting low hymns to Hel, goddess of the underworld. Children are ushered to the hearth corner. Elders glance toward the shadowy rafters. Yule is a time when the barrier between worlds thins. Anyone who steps outside alone without protection risks meeting a Draugr, an undead revenant hungry for the living. You slip on your wolfskin mask and join the ghost watch, pacing the perimeter, spear in hand. A cold wind whistles through gaps in the logs. Could be the Draugr or just the wind. Either way, you mutter a prayer under your breath and keep moving. The divine toast, cups to Odin and Freyr. At the climax of the night, the Jarl stands on a raised bench, lifting a silver-rimmed drinking horn. He pours mead into 3 horns, passes one to the priest, one to the warrior champion, and keeps the third himself. To Odin All-Father, giver of wisdom and madness. To Freyr, lord of bounty and the boar's strength. They drain their horns in unison, liquid gold flooding their throats. The crowd roars, glasses slam, and you curse the gods in your own mind. Thanks for frostbite, plague, and goat sacrifices, you capricious brutes. But you still lift your horn and join the chant, because you know that in this world, mocking the gods is the quickest way to ensure they come for your tongue. The dance of the Yule goat. As the horns echo, the children appear again, some wheeling small wooden goats festooned with ribbons and straw. They dance in a circle around the fire, leaping and squealing, the Yule goat ritual meant to chase away evil spirits. At the end, they crush the wooden goat beneath their feet, symbolizing the destruction of last year's misfortune. You stomp your boot in time, but misjudge a step and nearly trip over a log. The entire hall erupts in laughter. You offer a bow, cheeks burning, and vow to practice goat dancing in secret until next Yule. Midnight, feasting, a test of endurance. With all rituals complete, the feast recommences. You gorge on smoked boar, dried fish, barley porridge thick with currants, and cheese made from goat you barely recognize. Each course arrives with a hymn or a boast. Your stomach protests, but you press on. Yule gluttony is a sacred duty. Someone offers a bowl of skyr laced with honeyed nuts. You accept and choke it down, praying it doesn't carry any runic curses like the cakes did. When the final course, roasted marrow bones, is presented, you groan and push your plate away. It doesn't matter. Everyone's still encouraged to eat until no one can eat another bite. Survival of the fattest Viking style. Dawn's icy gray light in the long, slow aftermath. As the first pale light seeps through smoke-darkened windows, the survivors of Yule, pale, bloated, and half delirious, stagger to the door. The Yule log has burned down to coals, its protective power waning until next midwinter. You clutch your aching ribs and stagger outside to breathe in the icy air. The villagers collapse in snowbanks, too drunk or too stuffed to move. Children laugh, chasing reindeer that wander by. The world is silent except for occasional groans and the crackle of ice breaking underfoot. Tomorrow, the hungover will repair thatched roofs torn down during the festivities. The skalds will create snarky verses about everyone's drunken misadventures. The blacksmith will bend back into his forge, and farmers will trudge back to frozen fields. But for today, the nightmare carnival of Yule lingers in staggered steps, in grease-smudged faces, in bones still faintly throbbing. You wrap your cloak tight and whisper as you stumble home, "Next Yule, maybe I'll just send a greeting rune and sleep through the whole thing." But deep down, you know you'll be back, because nothing says "survived another winter" like a dark night of feasting, fear, and frost-tipped ritual. Part 3. Witchcraft, Revelry, and the Dark Heart of Yule. You've survived the blot, the gift gauntlet, and the bone-deep chill of the giant boar hunt. But Yule's true madness lingers in the hours before the final dawn. Those long, bitter nights when the boundaries between the living and the dead blur, and the only thing more dangerous than the cold is the firelight, flickering in every shadow. Welcome to Part 3, where we plunge into Satyr, Norse witchcraft. Reckless midwinter games, blood oaths gone wrong, and the creeping dread that sometimes arrives not with frostbite, but with whispered words. The Cider Circle, prophets, curses, and raven bones. By the third night of Yule, whispers spread that the vulva, the traveling seeress, has arrived. Clad in wolf pelts and crowned with a circlet of raven feathers, she sets up her circle deep in the longhouse's back chamber. Villagers file in single file, farmers desperate for a glimpse of spring, warriors haunted by battlefield fates, and women seeking remedies for unknown pains. You squeeze in behind half-drunk kin and watch as the seeress cradles a small bowl filled with raven bones. Legends say they once belonged to Hugin and Munin themselves. She chants in a language older than the fjord, her voice rising and falling like wind through dead trees. One by one, she casts bones onto a heated metal plate, fractured, bleached fragments that click and spin. Where they land, she reads fortunes or curses. "A fracture at Jera," she intones. "Your fields will yield bountiful grain next year." Or, Thurisaz reversed. "A tormenting frost shall visit your herd." One unlucky farmer hears Nauthes, the rune of need, and he wails that his wife is on the verge of death. The seeress merely nods, packs her bones, and slips into the night, leaving a litter of terrified souls clutching their breath. You realize that on Yule, true fear isn't the cold, it's the glimpse of destiny's razor. Midwinter, wrestling, ice-glazed carnage. When dawn reluctantly returns, the village square transforms into an ice rink, a frozen pond rimmed by curious onlookers. Here, Yule's next ritual unfolds, midwinter wrestling. Two burly champions strip to their woolen undergarments, greased with lard for fair play, and slip onto the ice. Their boots are silent, their breath plumes in the frigid air. At the chieftain's roar, they grapple, slipping and sliding, fists pounding into thighs and ribs. Every throw ends with a bone-jarring thud that echoes like a war drum. Onlookers shout advice, "Aim for the knee. Don't let him twist your arm." But the only rule is survival. No holds are barred. Last year's champion, old Gunnar the One-Eyed, faces young Bjorn the Bear Cub. They crash across the ice, spines rattling, until Gunnar somersaults Bjorn into the snowbank. Crowds cheer, snow flies, and Bjorn lies still for a moment before coughing and rising, chest heaving. Wrestlers clasp arms in grudging respect, then retreat to warm fires, hopefully with every rib intact. You shuffle away, shivering, and wonder if you'd risk it for prestige or if you're content to cheer. Blood oaths in the hearthlight, loyalty tested. Back inside the longhouse, by the roaring embers of a hastily restoked Yule log, sworn friends and rival families gather to renew blood oaths of loyalty and revenge. 2 clans, one from the coast, one from the forest, meet at the hearth. Each pledges blade for blade. Let my blood drip onto your sword's hilt until it's soaked through. A ceremonial dagger passes between them, each nicking a finger and pressing bleeding palms together. The scent of iron and sweat hangs thick, but oaths are fragile. Weeks later, one clan forgets a promised raid to avenge an insult. The other clan brandishes the same oath at the next Yule, demanding vengeance. What began as solemn loyalty becomes an excuse for feuds. Cattle rustle, longboats burned, and widows wailing. You recall that blood oaths were meant to bind people tighter than kin, but sometimes they bind only curses that echo through generations. Bewitching, brew, ale women and poison runes. Meanwhile, in a dark corner of the hall, the village alewoman, Olga Ironhand, brews her infamous Needhog's draught, a heady concoction rumored to inspire prophetic dreams or bitter curses depending on the runes stirred into the barrel. Her process is spectacle. She plunges a carved staff into the frothy ale, chanting runes for boldness and truth. Villagers queue for a hornful, hoping for a glimpse of their fortunes and dreams. Instead, they get nightmares, visions of skeletons in the fields, burning homesteads, or grotesque mockeries of themselves dancing on clouds of smoke. A drunken farmer, Sigurd the Stoic, insists on a second horn. Declared Olaf's ghost is taunting him. By dawn, he's delirious, muttering about ravens tearing his eyes. Women drag him to the seeress's hut, hoping to undo the spell. Olga merely shrugs. Magic is medicine with a blade's edge. Drink at your own risk. You decide to stick with simple mead, bland, but it doesn't carve nightmares into your skull. Hunting the Yule cat, prey or predator. As evening deepens, a chilling rumor spreads. The Yule Kotarin, the Yule cat, roams the snowy streets hunting those who did not receive new clothes for Yule. Tradition says that regardless of age or status, anyone without fresh winter garments by Yule Eve becomes its prey. You peer out into the dark, swaddled in your patched cloak, too old for presents this year. Every swish of wind sounds like padded paws. Every flicker of torchlight hides glowing eyes. Your only consolation, you did receive the woolen cap from your patron's wife. A small token, but enough to save you from feline fate. Yet the dread lingers. You imagine the cat's spectral pounce, fur rippling like candlelight, jaws snapping shut around bare ankles. On Yule, generosity is not just virtue, it's self-preservation. Skaldic saga, recitals, epic tales by candlelight. To calm frayed nerves, the skalds gather by the fire. Their subject, the burning of Vergelmir, a saga of a warrior who sailed to the underworld to save his sister, only to be trapped behind ever-golden gates. The audience leans in, hoods drawn against the cold, as the skald's voice rises and falls, describing lava rivers and frost giants turning into statues of grief. The trick to Yule's storytelling is the cliffhanger. Just as the hero treads molten shores, the skald snaps his fingers and demands a horn refill. You stumble forward with your horn, filling it to the brim, and when you return, the warrior has survived only to face a pack of wolves. You cheer, partly for the hero, partly for the whiskey coursing through your veins. These sagas aren't mere entertainment, they're lessons in endurance, reminding you that if a hero can face hell itself, you can endure frostbite and goat blood, snowball war and frost hammer, challenges. Outside the longhouse, half-drunk villagers muster for a snowball war, complete with improvised leather armor and knotted mittens. Children serve as medics, carrying water skins and bandages. Snowballs harden around stones, each throw can shatter a knuckle. Young warriors charge battalions across icy fields, bullets zooming overhead like hailstones. When a throw strikes a bystander's shoulder, they howl and leave the field, nursing bruises. At the center stands the Frost Hammer Challenge, a massive wooden hammer carved with frost rune patterns. Each man takes turns swinging it at a log target. The one who splits the log in two on the first blow wins glory. You heft the hammer like it's made of lead, wind up with all your strength and bring it down, only to glance off the log's edge, spraying wood chips into the snow. Crowds boo, children laugh, your pride splinters worse than the log. You bow, nursing phantom bruises, and wonder why you thought hitting wood would be easier than wrestling on ice. Oathbreaker's punishment, stocks in shame. Every Yule features at least one oathbreaker, a man who skipped the blot, a woman who secretly sold her gift instead of giving it, or a youth who stole mead from the communal barrels. Once identified, often by drunken tattletales, they're dragged to the stocks erected at the hall's entrance. Held in place by iron yokes, they endure jeers and snowballs for hours, until dawn. This year, it's little Gunnar the Quick Fingers, caught pocketing barley cakes. He's forced to wear a sign, Thief of Yule. Veiled women toss scraps of rotten fish at him, while men shout mock oaths, "May your pockets freeze." When his time is up, he staggers off, humbled, shivering, and determined never to steal bread again. You shiver too, realizing that Yule's generosity has a brutal underside, enforcing communal norms with scorn as much as spirit. The final sacrifice, smoldering ashes and new beginnings. At the nadir of night, the last embers of the Yule log still burn in the hearth. The Jarl summons a final sacrifice, a small calf or lamb offered to Freyr, signifying hope for fertility in the coming year. You watch as the animal's throat is cut, its blood showering the hearthstones. Flames leap higher and the air stings with smoke. Halberg and furs shift in the dancing light. As the fire consumes the sacrifice, the Jarl raises his arms. From these ashes may we rise into a year of plenty, our fields green, our halls warm, and our children laughing. The crowd echoes the chant, voices raw. You raise your hands too, feeling a flicker of warmth, not from the flames, but from the shared madness that binds you to these people, these rituals, and this endless wheel of sacrifice and rebirth. Dawn approaches, stumbling towards sunrise. By the time the first pale hint of dawn bleeds into the sky, the hall is littered with slooping bodies, spent furs, and half-drunk horns. You stagger outside, the snow crunching beneath frost-numbed boots. The world is hush and silver, the air so cold it hurts to breathe. The Yule cat is gone, the seeress's bones put away, the skald's campfire smoke trailing upward. Nature seems paused, awaiting the new year's beginning. Villagers press toward homesteads, some to collapse into straw mattresses, others to check on livestock, ensuring they survived all the blood rites. Children chase rabbits cautious in the pre-dawn light. You walk home, cloak wrapped tight, face stinging with cold and exhilaration. Yule's final lesson echoes. To survive the darkest night, you must embrace its terrors, its revels, its curses, and its sacred hope that the sun will return. Part 3 of Yule's saga reveals the raw heart of Viking midwinter, the seeress's bone-casting, bone-crushing games on ice, blood oaths twisted into feuds, and the fragile line between blessing and curse. Only one more chapter remains, the slow thaw into the new year and the painful come-down of hungover warriors, rebuilding what they tore down for the sake of tradition. Will any of them emerge unchanged? Stick around for Part 4, where we confront the real aftermath of Yule's nightmare carnival. Part 4, the aftermath, rebuilding, regrets, and the return of the sun. The first pale light quivers on the horizon. Yule's long night has ended, yet the echoes of revelry, regret, and ritual linger in the chilled air. You step from the longhouse into a village half asleep, half mournful. Straw mattresses flattened by spent bodies, ale barrels scraped empty, and snow embossed with every imaginable footprint. Now begins the slow, bone-aching process of reckoning with what you did, what you lost, and what it means to greet the sun again. Hangover hells and frosted tongues. No sooner have you opened your eyes than your skull throbs like the beating wings of a wounded raven. You stagger upright, clutching your head as if it might fall from your shoulders. Your tongue feels as though it was dipped in tar and frozen solid. Your throat is a desert where no mead flows. You manage to force a swallow of tepid water, so rancid from days in the trough that you nearly vomit. Other villagers emerge in groggy clusters, muttering curses at the gods, children screaming for breakfast, and the blacksmith already hammering out horseshoes on a frozen anvil. Yule's hangover is a crucible, nausea and guilt entwined, reminding you that every horn emptied demanded a price, threshing the fields of remorse. By mid-morning, you trudge to the fields, frozen, barren, and half-littered with the detritus of the sacrifice. You spot goat bones gnawed nearly clean of marrow, pig skulls cracked open for curiosity, and runic-etched stones scattered where they fell. The priest beckons you to help gather the sacrificial remnants, claiming they must be buried beneath the new field to bless the spring's planting. You sling frozen bones over your shoulder and heave them into a pit you dig in the permafrost. Each shovelful of earth feels like shoveling your own conscience back underground. You swear never again to feast as if tomorrow were certain. Repairing the longhouse and the Yule log's ashes, rain, wind, and goat's blood have torn holes in the longhouse's sod roof. You scramble up the rafters with hammer and thatch, nailing sod pieces over gaps so snow won't drive in like a blade. Inside, you sweep ash and embers from the hearth, collecting glowing coals in a metal pot to relight the fire later. The Yule log's last embers cool to gray dust, and with them, the conviction that the gods watched kindly. You grind the ashes into the clay floor, muttering a quick blessing so the hearth can serve as a hearth again, not a portal to hell. Part of you wonders if the gods even care about floor smoke and goat burial, but better safe than cursed, mending furs, cloaks, and broken pride. While the sun rides higher, just a few hours of daylight, you retire to your small workshop, a loft strewn with scraps of wool, deer hide, and sewing awls. Your patron's wife left you a bolt of red cloth, meant as thanks for aiding the boar hunt. You cut and stitch, marrying patches of fur to torn tunics, sewing fresh buttons from antler to secure the new Yule cap. As you work, you replay scenes from the long night, the wrestling match's final throw, the blood oath's whispered promise, the laughter when you tripped in the goat dance. Each stitch feels like a stitch in memory, binding you back to the person you were before Yule's chaos. The silent toll of the Draugr. As evening nears, the seeress's bone-casting circle has faded from the hall, her raven bones tucked away until next midwinter, but villagers still glance warily at doorways, muttering charms against Draugr return. You walk past each homestead, listening for creaks in the rafters or the skitter of unseen claws. Some nights you dream of those undead, skeletons drifting toward you through moonlit snow. Now, you speak a simple incantation, Needhog's Scourge, be gone, and draw a rune in the air with your finger. It's half theater, half reassurance. In these long nights, the mind conjures more terrors than the frost ever could. Yule's unearthed debt and social ledger. While you repair roof and hearth, the Jarl convenes the village by the repaired feast table, now a scarred monument to past revels. He reads aloud the outstanding debts, livestock borrowed for the feast, jars of mead promised to neighboring clans, and the tavern owner's claim for ale spilled on the floor. Each name garners a grunt, paid in kind, work off in the smithy, or you owe your labor. When your name comes up, you owe 2 goats and 3 days of farm labor. Your stomach sinks. Yule's generosity extends grudges. The social ledger resets only when debts are repaid. You nod grimly, already tallying hours at sunrise. Children's laughter and the Yule goat's remains. At dusk, children dash past you, clutching halves of the broken Yule goat, its wooden body split in 2. They drag the remains to the edge of the village and leave them as offerings to the forest spirits. "Take this, old Jolakotarin," they cry, "and leave us for good." You watch their small silhouettes illuminated by torches giggling at the goat's final demise. Innocence remains. They believe rituals can end fears. For them, Yule is a carnival remembered in laughter, not the bone-cold dread you feel. You envy them that simple faith. Skaldic reflection. The tale of Yule, reborn. That night, around the reconstructed hearthfire, the Skald returns with a fresh saga. This one about a chieftain who survived 1,000 winters by out-drinking a frost giant and out-singing a banshee. You listen with half-closed eyes, propping your head on your hand. The Skald's words weave warmth back into your chest, reminding you that stories, like fires, can rekindle spirits. You offer him a horn of newly brewed ale, though it's weak compared to Yule's draft, and he smiles, raising it in salute. Together, you toast to survival itself. May our sagas outlast winter's bite. First signs of thaw. Hope and hesitation. As dawn edges closer, you step outside to see icicles melting, small rivulets running down roofs. The sun, though low, feels warmer than in weeks. You feel the weight of Yule's trials lift slightly as the promise of spring peeks over the horizon. Yet a part of you hesitates, unwilling to let go of the camaraderie forged in fire, blood, and unholy rites. You realize that Yule's nightmare carnival, for all its horrors, bound your community in ways ordinary days never could. The shared trauma is now a shared memory, and one that will pull everyone back next midwinter. The quiet promise, surviving to celebrate again. In the still fading night, you walk to the graves of fallen goats, boars, and one poor soul who got locked in stocks too long. You scatter handfuls of salt and barley on each mound, a small tribute to lives lost and lessons learned. You whisper a vow, by next Yule, may I stand stronger, give wiser gifts, and wrestle demons both real and imagined. The sky brightens, birds silent all season, pip twice. The world inhales its first thaw-kissed breath in months. You return home, shoulders straighter, heart wiser, and soul forever marked by Yule's savage rites. You know that when the sun sets earliest again next midwinter, you'll be ready, once more, to feast in fear, revel in blood, and conquer the long night. Yule's story ends not with a bang, but with a fragile promise that life, like the seasons, endures beyond sorrow, feasting in frost. You clutch your repaired cloak, glance back at the warm glow of the longhouse, and step forward into the new year, scarred, fortified, and alive.